Kumar, HLF team and festival committee members, I am delighted to extend a very warm welcome to all our viewers and friends of HLF to the 12th annual edition of the Hyderabad Literary Festival. While the pandemic robs us of the electric atmosphere of an on-ground festival, it also gives us the opportunity to reach out to a larger audience participating from the comfort of their homes from different cities, nationally and internationally. The pandemic also increased the frequency of our connect with our audiences in the past 2 years as we began our fortnightly HLF online sessions that have been viewed by many all across the world. HLF 2022 has not sacrificed any of the streams that we offer in our on-site festivals, and therefore we bring to you literary sessions, Kavya Dhara, stage talks, storytelling, workshops, Nanha Nukkad, Yangistan Nukkad, films, and exhibitions. We are dedicating this festival to a very dear friend and an invaluable colleague, Ajay Gandhi, who left us too soon. I would like to highlight a few features of HLF 2022, but please refer to the full schedule and enjoy the lovely spectrum that we have curated for you. Partnering us in this festival is British Council, and the guest nation is United Kingdom. The regional language of focus this year is Punjabi. Gracing this festival are, in the order of appearance in the schedule, musician T.M. Krishna, distinguished photographer Raghu and his author wife Gurmeet Rai, Nandana Dev Sen, Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee, and several others. Ahmed Jamal and Farooq Dhondi will pay tribute to the memory of Mahmood Jamal. We bring you a unique theatre experience with audience interactive play. The Art of Facing Fear, World United, performed live by 20 artists from 5 continents, and which you must join in a webinatorium using the link provided. This will not be available for later viewing, so don't miss it. Workshops are available on Zoom to those registered. There is a discussion with a filmmaker that is again only on Zoom. Exhibitions can be viewed virtually by the link given, and films have been put on a playlist that you can see at your convenience till the end of the festival. All other sessions can be watched live on our YouTube channel. I now have the pleasure of introducing our chair, Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, without whom the art and culture scene in Hyderabad would be incomplete. We are grateful to him for having joined this session despite his inclement health. Jayesh Ranjan is the Principal Secretary of the Industries and Commerce and Information Technology Departments of the Telangana government. His assignment involves developing policy frameworks, attracting new investments, identifying opportunities for utilizing IT in various government processes, and promoting the digital empowerment of citizens. Jayesh Ranjan supports many social, cultural, sports, and charitable causes and is on the boards and advisory committees of several such organizations, including chairing the festival committee of our own HLF. We're indeed fortunate to receive his abundant support. In absentia, I introduced Jonathan Kennedy, who could not be here due to some unexpected development. Jonathan Kennedy joined the British Council in February 2019. As the Director Arts for the British Council in India, Jonathan is responsible for developing national strategy, managing stakeholder relationships across government and the creative industries, and conceptualizing programs to promote and strengthen India-UK cultural relations through collaboration, connections, and creative partnerships. From 2007 to 2019, he was the Executive Director of Tara Arts, contributing especially to the major 2.8 million GBP capital redevelopment of Tara Theatre and the launch of the Black Theatre Live National Touring Consortium. Earlier, he was Arts Programs Manager of Croydon Clock Tower and Head of Studio and Program Development at Wimbledon Theatre. In the UK, he was a regular guest lecturer in all aspects of theatre producing, leadership, and arts management in several distinguished academic institutions. I am now delighted to introduce our festival committee members who are present here in this session. Some of them who are present here in this session. Dr. C. Ram Manohar Reddy, economist and editor-in-chief, the India Forum. Nandini Rao, always supported HLF through OBS books and giving Vidyaranya as a venue for conducting the festival. Masiuddin Ahmed, General Manager, Vibrant Ford, the logistics go-to man. Veena Kamlapalli Rani, working in a reputed school, is an organizer and an adventure trail enthusiast. Thank you all for your unstinting support. I now invite Mr. Jayesh Ranjan to give his opening remarks and inaugurate this festival.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kinnera. Greetings to all the committee members. Greetings to all the participants. It is a matter of great it's a matter of great pride and joy to be a part of the 12th edition of the Hyderabad Literary Festival, which despite the challenges posed by the pandemic for the last couple of years, we have been able to create this event as an online event very, very successfully. As Professor Murthy spoke about, if you look at the program schedule for the next 3 days, I mean, you will feel that nothing better could have been organized in terms of the array of speakers, the array of authors, and all kinds of interesting and engaging activities. There are films which are going to be screened. There is a play in which participants from different locations are juxtaposing themselves to play their own characters. There are workshops, there are discussions, there are forums for young participants, and so on and so forth. So as one would have enjoyed an in-person physical event, there'll be nothing short of appreciation and enjoyment in this virtual forum as well. The Hyderabad Literature Festival has become a very important national festival in the short period of a decade plus. We have in the past seen amazing footfalls at all the venues where we have hosted this event. People have come from other cities also, outstation visitors also, because they find the caliber of the event and the way in which it has been organized. Literally, there are no barriers between the speakers and the audience. People are free to intermingle with anyone. They find these kind of features of the Hyderabad Festival to be something very unique in the country. There are other festivals which perhaps are better known, they're better publicized, but the character, the intimate character of the literary festival here, the shared moments between the speaker, the author, and the audience, that is something which people really appreciate. And over these last so many years, that is how the reputation of this festival has been built. Every year, as is the tradition, we select a partner country whose efforts in literature, culture, arts is showcased. And there is a language, an Indian language, which is also highlighted so that people are aware about the richness of regional writing in our country. So UK is the partner nation, as you heard a while ago, and Punjabi is the language in focus. Again, the ties between Hyderabad and UK go very, very far, not just the British presence in India, but even before that. And subsequently, lots of engagements have continued between this part of India and the UK. There are many eminent writers from UK who have visited Hyderabad in the past, even outside the HLF platform, and regaled their appreciative audience with their readings and their interactions, etc. Punjabi also is a very important part of the diaspora, which is there in Hyderabad today and also outside Hyderabad. In fact, in Telangana, there are pockets. For example, Karimnagar is a very important city, which has a huge Sikh population, Punjabi-speaking population. Hyderabad itself, since generations, has witnessed Punjabi settlements, Sikh settlements. In fact, there is a location, there's a neighborhood which is called Sikh village here in our city. And people from Punjabi background, Punjabi speaking community have participated and assimilated in multiple activities, professional activities, trade and commerce, arts, culture, sports, and so on and so forth. They have played a very important role in building the city of Hyderabad, the new state of Telangana. And it is very befitting that we have chosen Punjabi as the regional language in focus. And again, some of the best work in this language, particularly of recent origin, that is going to be showcased. So I have no doubt that the festival will continue to stand out as a very, very engaging 3-day event. And between the last year and now, as Professor Murthy spoke about, we have introduced a few new initiatives. So once a fortnight, there is an online forum on which discussions and book readings, etc., take place. So now one need not wait for this annual event. Of course, this remains our signature event, but throughout the year, the HLF team engages the audiences, our followers, with one interesting offering after the other. We have also started bringing out a newsletter, which three editions have already come so far. And again, the newsletter has some very distinctive features. It reviews books, talks about some interesting phenomena, which is making news in the literary world, and so on and so forth. So these have been some ways in which we have engaged our audiences beyond this annual signature event, and we hope to continue to do more. One of the unfinished items on our agenda is to promote book clubs in all the schools and colleges, so that young readers from an early age, that is, start appreciating the world of reading, the world of writing, the world of authors, and hopefully it may motivate some of them to themselves become accomplished authors in days to come. So there is a lot on our plate for the next 3 days starting now, and I do look forward to getting your feedback. Whatever else you think we should do to keep the spirit of the festival alive, to make it more meaningful, more participatory, please do reach out to us. And finally, I also join all my colleagues in paying tribute to Mr. Ajay Gandhi. As all of us know, he was a part of the founding team of this festival 12 years ago. And apart from the HLF, his contribution towards enriching Hyderabad's and Telangana's landscape of culture, of debate, of discussions, of original thinking is unparalleled. So my tributes to him. And there are other events also. In fact, immediately after the inaugural session, there's a very befitting tribute by Maestro T.M. Krishna to Mr. Ajay Gandhi. So fond memories of Ajay, and hopefully we have been able to continue the good work that he began so many years ago, and we will continue to do that in years to come. So greetings to all of you once again. Have a great 3 days event here as a part of the HLF 12th edition. I would now also request, since Jonathan has not been able to join us here on in this slot, he has a recording for us. So can we play the video of British Council, please?
Hello, I'm delighted that the British Council has partnered with Hyderabad Literary Festival and Dr. T. Vijay Kumar, Festival Director, and Jayesh Ranjan IAS, Principal Secretary, Department of INC and IT at the Government of Telangana, with whom we have been privileged to collaborate with some great arts and education work over the recent years. We experience literature in many ways, through film, performance, poetry, reading, and podcasts. And this dynamic approach is alive at the Hyderabad Literary Festival, that showcases the length and breadth of literature through culture, art, and film. A love for literature and avid curiosity around writers' stories has for generations connected people across India and the UK, from Shakespeare to Dickens and Austen to Malory Blackman. Through its work in literature, The British Council focuses on building connections and increasing mutual understanding between artists and readers across the globe. British Council are delighted that in India's 75th anniversary of independence to partner once again for 2022's edition of the Hyderabad Literary Festival. And we acknowledge that the UK is guest nation this year, which is very exciting. The prospect of enabling some of the best emerging and established UK authors to engage with Indian counterparts, fans, and audiences through readings, discussions, and film. It's important to share our cultural values for equality and to see the diverse UK presence at this festival through organisations like the National Centre for Writing in Norwich, Arts and Humanities Research Council UK, and programming by UK-based organisations like Speaking Volumes and Out on the Page, who have coordinated the participation of some of wonderful writers, especially from underrepresented LGBTQI communities and Black and Asian writing talent at the cutting edge in the UK. We have more than 10 UK writers and speakers participating in the festival, in discussions, readings, and on film, including, to name just a few, Siddhartha Malya, Kavitha Rao, Uma Magal, Juliet Jacques, Sandeep Raina, Farooq Dondi, and Muni Akiyari, among others, exploring important, relevant contemporary themes of diaspora writing, gender, and women in medicine. In addition, we're also screening the fabulous adaptation of Shakespeare's Measure for Measure, Ram, written and produced by pioneer of multicultural television in Britain, Mahmoud Jamal, and directed by Ahmad Jamal. You may know that the British Council has been developing over the past year the Festivals from India platform, which will be launched in March of this year with our partners. The festival platform is aimed to build bridges between festivals across India and with the UK, and showcases festival partnerships in India with Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England. Do subscribe to join the database, festivalsfromindia.com. In the meanwhile, British Council sends its very best wishes to Hyderabad Literary Festival and all of the artists and audiences joining hands online this year. The very best wishes.
Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, who is also the president of Moving Images Club, to formally inaugurate the film section. After this, the playlist will be live on our website.
Thank you, Kinara. It's a matter of great honor to inaugurate the films segment of the 12th Hyderabad Literary Festival. Let us hope that it enjoys huge patronage earlier editions. The films for the 12th edition of HLF, please.
I request Dr. C. Raman Reddy to please inaugurate the exhibition section of HLF 2022.
Good evening, Kinara. Thank you. It's a pleasure to inaugurate the exhibition section of HLF 2022. We have 3 sets of exhibitions. The first is on the title in Divine Rhythm. It's about the calligraphy of Parameshwara Raju. The second is on the conservation of the Hakims and Commanders Mausoleum, and the third is the Indian Photo Festival. Please do visit the exhibitions, and I'm sure there'll be a lot to enjoy and learn from them. Over to you, Kannada.
Jyoti, can we have the video? Thank you so much, Ram, for having inaugurated the exhibitions. Now, the films will be available to you right from this moment till the night of Sunday, the 30th. That means during the entire festival, you can watch them at your leisure. Exhibitions too, they will not only be available during the festival, but almost for 1 month, they will be online. So anytime you can visit, please do visit. There are some excellent and exquisite paintings and photographs. Please do visit them. Mr. Jay Ranjan.
Thank you. And I would now like to invite Professor T. Vijay Kumar to propose the vote of thanks and close the inaugural ceremony.
Thank you, JSG, and once again, on my own behalf and on behalf of the entire HLF team, this is indeed a great relief that we have been able to organize this festival. These are by no means the best of times. To sustain the annual festival in these tough times, we needed the generous help and support of various organizations and individuals. Desai, K.N. Ramurthy, and late Ajay Gandhi, who was leading us till a couple of months ago. And on behalf of the festival committee, headed by Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, and the entire team HLF, I sincerely thank first and foremost Mr. Jonathan Kennedy, Director Arts, British Council, for taking the trouble to record and send his congratulatory message despite his other commitments. I thank the British Council not only for partnering with us for this event, but for staying connected with the festival sector throughout the year by organizing several consultative group discussions. HLF 2022 is thankful for the major support it received from the International Literature Showcase Collaboration Fund. The ILS, which is a partnership between the National Center for Writing, Norwich, and the British Council, also helped us reach individual writers and literary organizations based in the UK, like Speaking Volumes and Out on the Page. HLF 2022 also received the support from the Arts and Humanities Research Council UK through one of the research projects funded by it. Our constant supporters, the government of Telangana, in particular, the Department of Language and Culture, Getty Zentrum Hyderabad, and the Indian Immunologicals Limited stood by us this year too. We cannot thank them enough for their unwavering and unconditional support. As always, several city-based literary and cultural organizations extended their support to HLF. Among them are Manthan, Saptaparni, Our Sacred Space, Annapurna College of Film and Media, NRB, and Food for Thought Foundation. A literary festival cannot happen without the support of authors, artists, and publishers. We thank all the publishers, speakers, and artists and resource persons who braved the completely punishing time zone differences and agreed to be with us during these 3 days. Our last and the sincerest thanks are reserved for you, our audiences, not only for joining us these 3 days, but constantly keeping us motivated through your support to our various initiatives mentioned by Mr. Jayesh Ranjan in his inaugural address. And these include the HLF Khabar, which will come out again. The 4th edition is about to come out, and also our fortnightly sessions on HLF online platform. So we sincerely thank all our audiences once again for joining us this event, and we look forward to your continued support. Thank you very much. And on my behalf and on behalf of the entire team HLF, I sincerely thank all our supporters, sponsors, authors, resource persons, and our viewers. Thank you very much.
So with this, we come to an end of
కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు పున్నాము వెన్నెల కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు నీరు నిమ్మల కింద గన్నెర్ల కింద వంగి పూలే రంగ కొంగందుకునే వంగి పూలే రంగ
Dear friends, this session is divided into two parts. The first will be a tribute to Ajay Gandhi. Ajay was a chartered accountant by profession, founded and headed a very successful accountancy firm, had launched an equally successful software for accountancy, was a co-founder of the unique platform for discourse, Manthan and the Manthan Samvad, one of the directors of Hyderabad Literary Festival, and was a part of several scores of committees and boards. After HLF tribute to Ajay, we will request Mr. Krishna to sing in memory of Ajay Gandhi, who knew Ajay and whom Ajay adored and respected, and had invited to several sessions at Manthan as well as Manthan Samvad. Mr. T.M. Krishna is a preeminent vocalist in the Carnatic tradition of Indian classical music. As a public intellectual, he speaks and writes about issues affecting the human condition and about matters cultural. He's a founder trustee of Sumanasa Foundation, which was established in 2005 with the objective of engaging with the art and the community. In 2016, he received the prestigious Raman Magasasya Award in recognition of his forceful commitment as artist and advocate to art's power to heal India's deep social divisions. His path-breaking book, among many excellent books and essays, is A Southern Music, the Carnatic Story, which came out in 2013, was a first of its kind philosophical, aesthetic, and socio-political exploration of Carnatic music. Dear friends, I too welcome you to the Hyderabad Literary Festival 2022, the 12th edition, albeit songs, an important member of our team. Ajay Gandhi joined the festival team on my request in 2013. The next festival, held in January 2014, was a game changer. We hosted a street festival on road number 12, Banjara Hills, with over 8 festival locations, and created a veritable extravaganza. We expanded our team, our events, the target audiences, the scope of sessions, and there was no looking back. We were a solid team, doing incredibly ambitious festivals year after year. Each time we increased footfalls, brought in more speakers and thinkers, added children's activities, poetry stream, meet my book, meet the author, and the scope increased beyond our small team could handle. This did not deter us, though every year we would wind up a festival by saying, "Not again. We cannot do this again." Ajay has been crucial in achieving this meteoric growth. He brought in volunteers, friends, family, and extraordinary speakers. You found Ajay truly enjoying the journey, intellectually and emotionally. Ajay was our man to go to in times of crisis. And you can well imagine festivals are a series of crises. Ajay never lost his cool. His rational approach never allowed himself to be riled, even if some of us would have liked him to be as upset as we were. I must let you into our tete-a-tete at internal meetings. These generally happened at my office, the Goethe Centrum, Hyderabad, the festival headquarters. When the going was rough, evenings late, bones weary, I would pull out a bottle of this or that, and Ajay would ensure all of us left more happy and less stressed. Yes, a glass of wine calmed us, but actually it was Ajay's cool, level-headed persona that made these festivals possible, and yes, mostly even fun. While Ajay was an ideator, he was an active doer, giving everyone a helping hand. At ground zero with volunteers, with vendors negotiating services and rates, with partners and sponsors offering them space and visibility, with working group hands-on suggestions and support, with colleagues calm, always sensible and collegial. He gave each member space and respect. Each person looked up to him for advice, and he worked with each to achieve solid results. He commanded respect, credibility, high quality of delivery. He often lifted the bar in his quiet, persistent manner, and each festival was better than the last. There is not one person I have met who knew Ajay and had not been impacted by him, or have a fine word to say about him. He gave everyone personal attention, and each felt connected to Ajay. As a friend and colleague, Ajay often confided in me, checked out my thoughts. To me, he had been sharing his wish to exit from the festival. Both of us had planned to do so together for the last few years. He would say, Amita, let me retire from HLF this year. And somehow, we both would get knee deep into it to extricate ourselves till it was too late. This year, though, he did not wait for my answer. Ajay has left a void. This festival would not have happened. However, Dr. Kinnara Murthy, Dr. Vijay Kumar and I felt we owe this one to Ajay. He would have wanted us to carry on, make this festival better than the last. Dear Ajay, I speak on behalf of all our colleagues, fellow directors, past and present, members of the advisory board, the working groups, and scores of volunteers. You are being missed sorely. They don't make them like this anymore, Ajay. Be well, and make sure you log into all the sessions wherever you are. This one is for you, dear Ajay. Thank you. May I invite Shri T.M. Krishna Garu to render his tribute, please.
ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు దిద్దరాని మహిమల దేవకీ సుతుడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు దిద్దరాని మహిమల దేవకీ సుతుడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు దిద్దరాని మహిమల దేవకీ సుతుడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు దిద్దరాని మహిమల దేవకీ సుతుడు అంతనింత గొల్లెతల అరచేతి మాణిక్యము పంతమాడే కంసుని పాలివజ్రము గంతనింత గొల్లెతల అరచేతి మాణిక్యము పంతాలివజ్రము కాంతుల మూడు లోకాల గరుడ పచ్చ పూస కాంతుల మూడు లోకాల గరుడ పచ్చ పూస కాంతుల మూడు లోకాల గరుడ పచ్చ పూస చింతల మాలోనున్న చిన్ని కృష్ణుడు చింతల మాలోనున్న చిన్ని కృష్ణుడు చింతల మాలోనున్న చిన్ని కృష్ణుడు చింతల మాలోనున్న చిన్ని కృష్ణుడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు దిద్దరాని మహిమల దేవకీ సుతుడు కాళింగుని తలలపై గప్పిన పుష్యరాగము ఏలేటి శ్రీ వెంకటాద్రి ఇంద్రనీలము కాళింగుని తలలపై గప్పిన పుష్యరాగము ఏలేటి శ్రీ వెంకటాద్రి ఇంద్రనీలము పాలజల నిధిలోన బాయని దివ్య రత్నము పాలజల నిధిలోన బాయని దివ్య రత్నము బాలుని వల తిరిగి పద్మనాభుడు బాలుని వల తిరిగి పద్మనాభుడు బాలుని వల తిరిగి పద్మనాభుడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు దిద్దరాని మహిమల దేవకీ సుతుడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద ముంగిటి ముత్యము వీడు దిద్దరాని మహిమల దేవకీ సుతుడు దేవకీ సుతుడు దేవకీ సుతుడు ముద్దుగారే యశోద वैष्णव जन तो वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार कर तो पर दुखे उपकार कर तो मन अभिमान नाणे रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार कर तो मन अभिमान नाणे रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे सकल लोक सकल लोक सहुने वंदे निंदन करे केणी रे सकल लोक सहुने वंदे निंदन करे केणी रे वाचकाच मन निश्चल राखे धन धन जननी तेणी रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे समदृष्टि तृष्णा त्यागी समदृष्टि तृष्णा त्यागी परस्त्री जेणे मातरे जिह्वा थके असत्य न बोले परधन नव झाड़े हाथ रे वैष्णव जन तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जैन मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जैन दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जैन दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे राम नाम छू ताली लागी राम नाम छू ताली लागी रहीम नाम छू ताली लागी रहीम नाम शूताळी लागी सकळ तीरथ तेणा तनु मारे वैष्णव जन को तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे वनलोभीन कपट रहित च वनलोभीन कपट रहित च काम क्रोध निवार्या रे वनलोभीन कपट रहित च काम क्रोध निवार्या रे भणे नरसिंहो तेनो दर्शन करता भणे नरसिंहो तेनो दर्शन करता भणे नरसिंहो तेनो दर्शन करता कुल एको तेरे तार्या रे वैष्णव जना को तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तो पर दुखे उपकार करे तो मन अभिमान नाणे रे वैष्णव को तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने मम चित्ते नीति नृत्ते के जे नाचे तथा थोई थोई तथा थोई थोई तथा थोई थोई मम चित्ते नीति नृत्ते के जे नाचे तथा थोई थोई तथा थोई थोई तथा थोई थोई मम चित्ते नृत्य नृत्ते के जे नाचे तथा थोई थोई तथा थोई थोई तथा थोई थोई तारी शुंगे की मृदंगे शतबाजे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तारी शुंगे की मृदंगे शतबाजे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई ममो चित्ते धृति वृत्ते तेजे नाचे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तारी शुंगे की मृदंगे शतबाजे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई कहशी कन्ना हीरपन्ना डोले भाले कपे चुंदे भालो मुंदो ताले ताले हशी कन्ना हीरपन्ना डोले भाले कपे चुंदे भालो मुंदो ताले ताले तथापि नाचे जन्म नाचे मृत्यु पाचे पाचे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई नाचे जन्म नाचे मृत्यु पाचे पाचे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई हशी कन्ना हीरापन्ना डोले भाले कपे चुंदो भालो मुंदो ताले ताले नाचे जन्म नाचे मृत्यु पाचे पाचे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई ममो चित्ते धृति नृत्ते के जे नाचे तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई तथा थुई थुई की आनंद दिवरात्रि नाचे मुक्ति नाचे बंधो কি আনন্দ দিবারাত্রি নাচে মুক্তি নাচে বন্ধ চোখে রঙ্গে চুটি রঙ্গে পাচে পাচে দাদা ধুই ধুই দাদা ধুই ধুই দাদা ধুই ধুই চিত্তে রীতি নৃত্যে কে যে নাচে দাদা ধুই ধুই দাদা ধুই ধুই দাদা ধুই ধুই মম চিত্তে রীতি নৃত্যে কে যে নাচে দাদা ধুই ধুই দাদা ধুই ধুই দাদা ধুই ধুই মম চিত্তে রীতি নৃত্যে কে যে নাচে দাদা ধুই ধুই 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 দাদা ধুই ধুই. Can I finish?
Befitting.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely befitting tribute.
citizen driven. All of us who have worked to bring this festival out are people from within your all friend circles. We are all citizens and volunteers who have brought this out. This has been an extremely satisfying festival. What the last 2 days have been fantastic. A great lineup of speakers, events, talks, discussions, and an amazing audience. It's great to do this HLF. Thank you. HLF rock! Come rain or sunshine, HLF goes on.
Thank you, Krishna Garu. This was a moving and befitting tribute to our dear friend Ajay Gandhi. Deeply appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you.
I move on to the next section, which is a conversation with Mr. T.M. Krishna on artistic universe, creative spaces within and without. Krishna Garu, as a performer par excellence, a commentator of cultural and socio-political issues of import, do you see any change to the artistic world of ours, excuse me, in the last years of pandemic, in terms of creation of articulation in the respective art forms?
There are multiple things that have happened, and they've all happened in different, shall we say, different quarters or different clusters. So I'm just going to touch upon a few of them. First, we always talk about the artistic universe as one word. This is artistic universe, and it's that itself is problematic on how we look at it. It is
It's as much as what happens around our streets. I mean, if we live in a colony of 4 streets, the 4 streets are not together. The 4 streets, there are demarcations, unwritten, written, seen, unseen, unheard, heard demarcations that develop in those 4 streets. Similarly, the world of art is not a unified force. It's the most divided force. It sounds like an oxymoron when you say art is a divided world, but that's the reality. It's divided by everything that other aspects of society, religious choices, class, everything. So therefore, each group has reacted in different manners. The worst hit are those who are on the margins, those whose names we don't know, whose art form's name itself we don't know. They live both in urban India and in rural India. So let's not exotify this as being something of a village phenomenon. It is not. It is as much happening probably in the back streets of your near your homes, and you just have never taken the effort to walk there. I had not taken the effort to walk there. So those professions and those artists have been deeply hurt emotionally, psychologically, and economically by what happened. We shut down this entire country in 24 hours in March 2020. At that time, especially performing arts requires public space. It requires social gathering. It requires events. It requires religious festivals, social occasions. Everything, no recourse for these people. And you must understand that most of the art world, first of all, is economically deprived. Don't look at people like me or look at people far more richer than me, like Amitabh Bachchan, and compare that to the art world. We are about 2% of the world. 98% is on the margins. Many of the artists do art one season and do agriculture or have a little shop or volunteer for work, daily wage work for 6 months of the year. But their bulk money comes when the festival happens. Now, with all this shutdown, with no government in this country doing anything concrete for them except for some very superficial announcements, they were really left in the lurch. While the migrant workers were struggling to go back home, these artists were struggling to get out of their house. Just the opposite situation, the irony of it. And I wouldn't say things have eased off. We did some work through our foundation over the last 2 years to try and do whatever we could do, but we are still scratching the surface of elite art forms, which are usually upper caste art forms. And there we had, even there, those whose names you and I don't know, we don't know what is happening to them unless you're there in the field. Then, so looking at people like me, let's look at people like me. So I think initially there was a complete, a sign of desperation that came in. The difference is these artists like me have this opportunity of going online, doing something digital. Whereas those in the margins don't even have that chance. They don't have an opportunity to do that. And their market is very local. Please understand that art markets are usually very local, the same district or the same village, except for art forms which have elitism of different kinds attached to them. So people like me, I think there was a certain desperation. The psychological impact, the emotional impact of not being able to share music or share art has deeply wounded a lot of people. And because of that, there's been different kind of a monopolization that has happened over the internet world. The digital world is not an equal space. This is a fraud that we are perpetuating for too long, and we have to stop doing that. It's an algorithm-driven, manipulated space. As much as we all agree that we are manipulated to the way we think in terms of social media, you're also manipulated artistically. You're manipulated aesthetically. You're told what to watch, what not to watch, which artist has the right tags after their video. It's such a messy area. So I think the last 2 years have been deeply problematic. It has led to a lot more hegemony than we can imagine, a lot more othering. And I really don't know how we need to change things inside us, the way we work, who we are. And digital fixes, technological fixes are not going to do it. We need a complete overhaul of the way we think of art, both as a state, as a society, and as individuals.
So you mentioned that there is a whole lot of othering that happened in the digital world. And how did that really impact the inner space, the creative space of an artist? And of course, I agree with you, we can't just put them all in one basket. A visual artist is a very different space than a performing artist. But what was this othering? What has that done to the community?
I mean, it's those who have not even had a digital opportunity. Some of them have tried and some of them may be successful, but just remember that if one person is successful, there are thousands and hundreds who have not had that avenue. First of all, it starts on the ground level, right? So if you just look at this, which other art forms that have, shall we say, beyond district level recognition or respect? Respect is the more important word that we should use. Popularity is not the same as respect. And these art forms don't have NRIs willing to pay money in New York City or in London to watch a video. I can sell my video to somebody in New York because my caste, my art form, my privileges allow me to have a market that transcends all borders and water and mountain lines. So what do these people do? I mean, they can put a Facebook song, but how does it affect you psychologically? What about the spirit of creativity, the spirit of being able to make music, make art? And that whole, you see, you ask any artist, an artist will tell you that, art is about just doing art at some level. It's about just that being able to do art and being able to see a smile or hear that appreciation or being able to share. That's completely off. And the digital space, even for those who have access to it, is no replacement. Is no replacement. It's just, we have no choice in the matter. So what does it do psychologically? What does it do to the ability to create? It's like, it's like a sport in some way, right? You have to constantly be playing the sport, to be in the sport. When you don't have an opportunity to sing, you don't have an opportunity to, that moment of inspiration that you draw, where is the inspiration coming from? Where is the environment for inspiration? All this cuts out. It's created a lot of depression. Artists are going through depression. Artists are going through inability to express themselves in the way they did 2 years ago because they've lost that attachment to that form of sharing. So, it is a very difficult phase. And many people told me that this will be a great time for you artists. You'll get a break. You can sit and practice. I can tell you, I cannot work. It's like there is a cloud. There's a really dark cloud hovering. It's not a free space. People mistake availability of time to freedom. It's not the fact that I'm free for 15 minutes or free for 3 hours today that makes it free. It's the psychological state of being in leisure. That is freedom. That could happen when I'm traveling 24 hours a day. That's gone for me. That leisure of space to be able to, what I would really say is actually great art comes when you're able to breathe. That's what I always think. It's in your breath. It's in that relaxation of that breath that art actually happens. And we have lost that. And there are very physical and practical difficulties. Theater artists, costumes are now gone. They have no capital money to make a new production. It's the instruments that have gone just pretty much out of unuse. So there are economic issues, there are psychological issues, there are emotional issues, but and we have provided nothing for artists. We've provided nothing for them.
So who is this who should be providing? Shouldn't the audience, shouldn't the beneficiaries of creative people and their energies participate somehow?
Well, that's entirely true to some extent. I agree that all of us do. And I think artists too artists who have that privilege should also be participating in whatever we can do. And audiences, yes, should also participate. But all this is still going to be surface level. The only institution that has, shall we say, the network to make change at a larger scale is the state. And we are a bunch of hypocrites. We keep talking about soft power. We keep talking about diversity in this country. Except giving grants and giving awards, what has any government in this country done for arts? And you can ask anybody about how difficult it is to get a grant. to write an application form. We're talking about people in villages and towns who don't converse in that kind of bureaucratic language. What have we done for artists? Zero. I'm angry, absolutely angry about it. Because we also, the worst part is the most disgusting part, is we as a state have always used artists to showcase the greatness of our country while doing nothing for them, nothing. And I really believe, and I've said this publicly twice, I've written about it, we need what I would call a socio-economic security plan for the art world. Something like Menegra, where every state, and this is very doable, I've done the math on it for Tamil Nadu, and I can tell you it's very doable. It's not rocket science, but it'll require a complete overall the way you think. If every state can say, to give it in a gist, if every state can say, if we have X number of districts, every year, artists who are in need, just like they do for NREGA, can self-apply for 100 days of artistic work. Okay, keep the payment lower than the market level, because only then people who really need it will apply. Make sure that every public school, every public college has cultural programs every week in that district. Make sure artists of that district are provided performances for any government event. Make sure that every socio-political campaign that you run uses artists from the district. These 4 things are enough to cover X number of artists per district. And it's not going to be much money in their checker too. This is doable. We need a security plan. Look at what Europe is doing. Look at what Germany has done. France has done. They're basically saying for the next 2 years, we will give you money.
Right.
Why? Because a society where art is alive is only a society. A society where art dies is a place of death for humanity, for thought, for questioning, for celebration. Everything dies. But I think we need to systematize this. I think every state can do this. I've tried and shared it with as many people as I can. But therefore, I agree with you to a large extent that private institutions, funding agencies, individual audience members can all participate. But it's still, from my experience, we've done over the last 2 years through the foundation that I am part of, we have supported close to 5,000 artists across 22 states and 2 union territories. This includes livelihood support, health support, buying instruments, helping them renovate a classroom. And we have, our fund is worth about 2 crores, and that's nothing. And if you think that this is one of the largest funds working only for artists in this country, it's even more depressing. The fund should be worth 200 crores or 500 crores.
Why? Why is it that we, Mr. Krishna, do not respect creativity, creative spaces, creative artists? Why is it that we negotiate heavily for every performance that is paid for? Why is it that a legacy where there were promoters of art that we have reached thus far? And how do we get out of it? Your plan, of course, is a very, very, very workable, very, very pragmatic plan. But how did we get here?
Yeah, but I mean, well, the truthful question is, should we ask, were we really anywhere? That's the question I always wonder, We were always a feudal society. Art has worked within feudal mechanisms. Always there's a benevolent zamindar, benevolent king, benevolent somebody. So fundamentally, artists, first of all, are trained not to challenge power to a large extent. Unless you belong to an artistic community that's already in the margins, where you just have to be heard and there's no other choice. And those art forms you will see, whether it is art forms that come from Dalit communities or art forms that come from African-American communities. Those are the art forms that really ask difficult questions of society, because honestly, we have given them no other choice. Every other part of social networking that art occupies is where power is never questioned. That's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that we have this, especially among the elite who have the money, we have this notion that art is a luxury. My own teacher, Sir Shamuguri Srinivas, is supposed to have said that, remember that music is not a necessity. It's not like food. I completely disagree with that. I mean, I would call him out and say that's nonsense. He's devalued himself by saying that. Music is a necessity. Dance is a necessity. Movement is a necessity. Poetry is life. So he's wrong. He's utterly wrong. But if an artist feels that the art is not necessary, why would society feel it's a necessity? Just look at that kind of an oppressive mindset we've cultivated between artists and audiences. So most people think that it's some luxury. So you first provide, a kapada, makan, job, business. Then we'll think about art. But don't they realize that if you want to make a person use a toilet instead of using, say, the open grounds, you need a cultural shift. And what can make that cultural shift? It is music, dance, drama, theater. That's what does it. So every societal change you want, political change you want, aesthetic acceptance that you're looking for, or inclusivity you're looking for, requires art. Art is a necessity. Unless we change that fundamental attitude, we Indians don't have that attitude. Either we exoticize something, make it divine and put it on a pedestal that nobody can access it, or you say that this is not needed now, we'll think of it later. Both those plans is how we function. And that has to be demolished and looked at artists as being something that is regular. That is just like doing everything else that breathes life into our lives. It's not a luxury.
Absolutely.
If it was a luxury, you would not have beautiful art in the poorest neighborhoods in the city and from some of the poorest communities in this country. You won't have so many art forms. You won't have Gond art. You won't have so many things. You won't have Rangoli.
Correct.
You won't have Rangoli if it was a privileged thing. It happens in every village, every hut.
With every ritual. With every
Absolutely.
ritual.
So we have to change
everything. Yes.
We have to change that mindset, I think.
Yeah. Is that why you think, and I'm moving a little beyond the pandemic times, is that why that every time an artist does participate in advocacy of the contemporary times, that they are singled out as somebody who are doing something that is really not what they're supposed to be doing? They're supposed to sing, they're supposed to dance, they're supposed to paint. Is that why we are not able to be part of the larger movement?
Yes, I think artists are considered should be people who are, there's this fraudulent word called apolitical. That is actually a word that has no reality in society. There is no act that is apolitical. Every act is political, if you understand the word political. So artists are supposed to do what they are trained to do. So, I mean, nobody asks the question is, what are they trained to do, first of all? What is art supposed to do? Nobody asks those behind the scene questions. But we all say art for art's sake. I mean, I always say when you say that, can you tell me what's art's sake? Define that for me, and then we will see what art for it is. So, we use these cliches and say, why doesn't T.M. Krishna just sing? But when T.M. Krishna sings, T.M. Krishna is making a political statement. When I sing Muddugar Yashoda, I am making a statement. I may not say it is. So the people say this because the moment artists make people uncomfortable, you want those artists not to exist. You call them, you want them to destroy, you believe they are destroying something, or some arbitrary notions that the bigotry perpetuates. So yeah, as long as you're a circus monkey who would basically just parrot what gives pleasure to the group that you address, you're a great artist. And the moment you tell the group that you address that, maybe maybe our conversation needs a bit of a change, and maybe there's a problem in our conversation, irrespective of the fact that it's 500 years old, 1,000 years old, or 1,000,000 years old, then there is a problem. So we don't want in this country artists to have a mind. Artists have been trained not to have a mind. And even if they do, they would rather do it over dinner quietly or murmur and then put on this big facade when you come to public space and say, why unsettle anything when everything is going fine for me? And please remember, to even say that, you need privilege. To say that nothing is bothering me itself is a statement of privilege. So yes, I think that's our fundamental issue. And we don't understand the interconnectivity between social, religious, cultural inhabitations, and how every one of these varying elements come into being only because there is thought, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah, I think you've said it already, that we have been trained, the artists have been trained to bow down to somebody who is going to take care of them and buy their art or support their artistic activity.
Yeah, I mean, we just replaced zamindar and kings with bureaucrats, politicians, event managers, and corporations. These four people have replaced zamindars and kings, and they behave in the exactly same manner. Corporates do exactly the same thing. All they care about is banners and advertisement space. Bureaucrats behave the same way. Politicians, lesser said, the better. Event managers try and see how to sell it better to corporates. So, I mean, it's the same. It doesn't change.
A nexus that must be broken.
Oh, yes, it has to be. I mean, at least it doesn't matter if it's one person or two people. I think everyone in their own way need to start asking difficult questions of these people and what they believe. Again, we can't allow them to determine what is art. We can't allow them to determine how art should be, what should be said, what should not be said. We can't allow that.
So is there a community within artists in different art forms which discourses this? Because this must be an issue that every artist, creative person is supposed to feel.
Yeah, I hope everybody feels this way. I'm just hoping. But I mean, I won't say there's anything formal, but I think it's fair to say that there is at least a group of us in different art worlds, inhabiting different kind of cultural and artistic spaces that are in conversation. We do talk to each other once in a while. We are raising similar issues in different domains, and we do crossover once in a while too. So yes, there is what I would call a loose agreement, at least among the people who have the power to say something. And I can completely understand if artists who are just making a mark, just finding their way, their bearings, who are unable to take on these structures. It's completely understandable. I mean, I wouldn't have taken on these structures 25 years ago. Let's be very honest. So it's because I'm in a position of power today that I'm able to question power. That's the whole problem of this power conversation, right? You need power to question power. If you don't have power to question power, you'll be kicked. So I can understand them not at least overtly doing anything now. And I completely agree with that strategy for practicality of art in their lives. But when people with privilege don't do it, it's really bothersome. That's when it really bothers me. But I think there is a loose group of us, and we all know the names of people who are asking these questions in their own way. We are partnering whenever we can. Whether this needs to be formal, of course, is a question that we need to probably address, and it's a good point to raise. Maybe there needs to be a formal network that we create that can ask these questions. I do hope that people watching this also start thinking, like you said, the audience needs to participate. They have to participate. Audiences have to remember, they can't go to a concert or go to a gallery and say, wow, by buying a painting or buying a ticket, you've contributed. You have not. Mm-hmm. Let's be very clear. You're not doing me a favor by buying a ticket. Mm-hmm. Artists should stop saying thank you for that. No, I think that's tiring. You're buying a ticket because you're drawing something from it. You're buying a painting because you're drawing something from it. So it's the greatness of that painting, of that song. May not be with the individual, but the song, if you get what I'm saying. So your participation is also going to recognize the ugliness that happens to these artists, to these art forms. That's when you participate, not when you write a check.
Absolutely correct. Krishna Garu, we are in this together and there is no way getting out of it. Thank you so much for doing what you do. And we have been following this, not only through your music, but through your discourses, through your participation, through your various other activities. Thank you for what you are and what you do, and to consolidate the efforts that many people are putting together. I must wind up now. It was the beginning of a discussion which I would be very happy to take forward. Thank you so much for setting the tone for this inaugural evening with your conversation. And of course, we are deeply indebted for your tribute to Ajay Gandhi. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say a word. Ajay was a very special man, a very kind human being that I got to know because of Manthan, actually. That's when through Vikram, who's his dear friend, and it is very sad that he's left us. But I think his impact on organizing spaces where open dialogues, both of the word and the song and of movement and of theater and poetry, can happen in different ways, is of a legacy that will remain. And I just hope that's where I think Ajay will live.
That's correct. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very
You
much.
summed it up. Thank you, Manthan, and thank you, Vikram, for bringing Krishna Garu to us. Thank you all for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
honor and privilege of hosting Sri Raghu Rai and Gurmeet Rai. And today we are going to discuss the book that has just come out, Amritsar, a city in remembrance. Who needs introduction to somebody, a legend like Raghu Rai? And yet it is my duty and a pleasure to say a line or two. His bio is already on our website. I just want to say that what an honor it is for HLF to have you with us this evening, sir. And Gurmeet ji, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Raghu Rai, as all of us know, is one of the best known photographers of our times. And he has published more than 50 books. And there is hardly an event in the history of the nation which he has not covered. And his books covered cities, Bombay or Calcutta, or events, some of the most historical moments in the history of the country have been captured by his camera. So I will not dare to say anything more about Raghu Rai ji. And Gurmeet Rai ji is, of course, a well-known conservation architect and who has been working on restoring the heritage of Amritsar city for almost 2 decades now. And she has been a UNESCO advisor, and her attachment to the city of Amritsar or Pune, they have been extraordinary, both from the point of view of a heritage conservator as well as an architect. And this book actually brings together the combined strengths of a collaboration between a writer and an editor and a photographer. This is a synthesis of a writer's, a conservationist vision and an artist's photography. So without any further ado, I would like to thank both Raghu Rai ji as well as Gurmeet Rai ji, and to have to discuss the book with us, with the authors. For us at HLF, we have Professor Usha Raman, and Usha is a communication specialist. She's a professor of communications at the University of Hyderabad, and she has worked a long years in this profession. And apart from many other things, she's also a poet, she's a writer, and she writes a regular weekly column in the Hindu on the latest podcasts. So Usha, thank you very much for this evening and for this conversation, Raghu Rai ji and Gurmeet ji. So over to you, and we hope to, and I'll be back with the audience questions about 35 minutes into the session, and we can start winding down the session once I reappear on stage. So with these few words, and once again, Raghu Rai ji and Gurmeet ji, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and over to Usha.
Thank you so much, Vijay. So I know that you've done an introduction, but I'd like to beg the indulgence of the audience to do a little bit of an introduction of my own. And I'd like to start with this photograph. It's a sharply drawn black and white portrait in context that pops up in any search relating to our guests today. One of them is in the frame. She's looking directly into the camera as she rubs the cold out of her hands on a winter morning. And the other is behind the lens, drawing into the frame, both mood and substance. The person in the frame is one of India's foremost conservation architects. The one making the frame has been dubbed the father of Indian photography. She reconstructs the brick and mortar edifices of our heritage, while he deconstructs the visual in a way that allows us to see things that the normal eye does not. They often also happen to be partners in more than a professional sense. And I'm delighted to be in conversation with these two individuals who have each in their own ways made us really see our social, political, and cultural landscape differently. So welcome to the Hyderabad Literary Festival, Gurmeet and Raghu Rai ji. I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting this conversation. As a journalism teacher and one-time journalist, Raghu Rai has, of course, been a formative influence on how one thinks about photojournalism in India. And as someone who cares about the stories in our built heritage, Gurmeet Rai has given voice and purpose to those stories. One does not really need a reason to have either of you on a stage, but there's a specific point of interest that brings you both into this edition of HLF, and that is your new book, Amritsar, A City in Remembrance. Gurmeet Rai is both editor of this volume and author of several essays in it, while Raghu Rai's photographs bring Amritsar to life in the present, even as a variety of archival visuals underscore the city's past. The book offers both homage and vision. It gives us history and a map to the city's history, but also a blueprint for how to preserve the city's memory in tangible, meaningful ways. I know that many in the audience would, of course, want to use this opportunity to hear about both your work beyond this book, but let's begin with this remarkable volume. As Vijay said, it's a remarkable collaboration. The 11 essays in the book give us many views into what Amritsar has been and what it is, and what it means to you, actually, what it represents in a spiritual sense, a historical sense, and the politics that have shaped it over the past 6 centuries. So I'd like to start by asking you, Gurmeet, to tell us a little bit about your journey with the book. How did you put it together? Because it gives us so many different views of the city in so many different ways.
Thank you so much, Usha, for this very, very touching and very welcoming, warm introduction. To begin with, I must mention that, as a conservation practitioner, I happen to be, or my generation happens to be the first generation conservation architects in the country. Before us, there were archaeologists and engineers with the Archaeological Survey of India who were engaged in the profession. So when we began our work, and I'm talking about early 90s, there was the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, INTAC, that was, largely the umbrella under which or with which we kind of began our profession. Mm-hmm. So we are all trained, my generation, I'm trained with the Western tools, with the colonial tools, how to look at material culture, and as an architect, and then of course as an architect, how do you read buildings, how do you read historic cities, how do you, all of that. So when I began my work, who I consider as a guru to me in conservation is Sir Bernard Fielden. And it just happened in those very formative years. I heard Sir Bernard talk about himself as a provincial architect. He spoke about himself, he said, one has to think global and work local. And that's how Sir Bernard was knighted for his work in heritage conservation. And he was one person who guided he was a mentor to all of us, our generation, because he brought in this, the first program of heritage conservation into India with the School of Planning, with its first department. So I, at that point, decided that I'm going to work in Punjab. I come from Punjab and I'd worked with INTAC for about 2-3 years. And I realized that every new part of the country I went, I was doing something which may culturally be, offensive. For instance, I'd gone to Mysore, and how we drink water or use a glass in the north, you just bring the glass to your lips, and then the other person picked up and poured from a distance, and I felt quite terrible. So I thought, let me just work in Punjab. I understand the language, I come from there are a lot of nuances that are in my DNA, and begin, and understand and develop our vocabulary, because, to decolonize, we didn't have that as part of our lexicon, but one clearly knew that what we've learned and what I experience in the landscape is very different. And having said that, I joined my conservation program in '89 in School of Planning. It was the same year when I married this man. Yes. And I'd seen his book on Taj Mahal, and I said, oh my God, I'm understanding more about heritage and landscape and people and, through his photographs than what I'd learned in college. So anyway, so I went back to Punjab to start working. And Amritsar has been, because I come from that region, the border areas. I come from Gurdaspur, and of course Amritsar is very important for us as a Sikh community. So for me, that started my journey with Amritsar began in '96, and there's a long story to that. But it's been a laboratory for me. It's been a learning laboratory for me. So what this book really holds is how the city, the layers of the city that I experienced. And this I thought was the best way, to my understanding, how to reveal the multiple layers of how we need to understand our cities, the tangible, the intangible, the contestations, the things that we are proud of, things that have been overwritten, have evolved, have transformed. And what, if you're trying to recover, can we get glimpses of what processes need to be put in place to recover with human dignity? Underlining it is human dignity. And can we recover heritage through processes which restore dignity to our people? What has been overwritten over time. So that's more or less, I think, an introduction to the book,
Yeah, sort of the logic behind the book. But if I could ask you a little bit about this, the way in which different sort of, what can I call it, sort of spirits, populate the book. So there is repeatedly in many of the essays, there is this reference to the spiritual. And there is also this reference to community. And I'm wondering if, Amritsar, possibly like some other cities in the country, one of the reasons conservation can be both, a very rewarding exercise, but it can also be an extremely fraught exercise, right? Because particularly Amritsar stands at sort of the crossroads of many historical forces. And I'm wondering how, did that sort of accidentally come out in the book because of the people you asked to contribute, or was that something you had in your mind as you asked for contributions?
I mean, as you know, that Amritsar was founded by the Sikh Gurus.
Right.
And, the understanding of my own, the faith or Sikhism as a practice, that has unfolded for me as I have engaged with the landscape of Punjab for the last 20 years. And so so that's how, so when I was reading every time, my engagement with Amritsar began with the nomination dossier for the Golden Temple as a World Heritage Site. So I kind of understood something at that point. It subsequently, I've had 10 years of working on the Gobindgarh Fort, which is a fort of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And so when I was reading about, so my research, I'm not a historian, my research into history is through the lens of material culture. So when I look at architecture, I look at forms, I look at materials and all of that, and then I read about personalities, and then I kind of look at the larger landscape of the socio-political narrative, of a micro to the macro. And, it's like when I look at the history of the Sikh Gurus, I look at it as a parallel line with the Mughal kings and the dynamics between Delhi, Lahore, Agra, Delhi, and this landscape within which the Sikh Gurus were. And so it's kind of very, very exciting, because suddenly you see faith through history as well, the lens of history. And it kind of endorses your I would say you start understanding a culture of a people very, very clearly when you kind of connect it with material culture. And so when I looked at Harmandir Sahib and the city of Amritsar and the Gobindgarh Fort, and through the material culture and through the history that I was reading, I realized that the one thing that holds everything together is the faith of what the Sikh Gurus put in place in the Guru Granth Sahib. in fact, that was the big one. Even when we prepared the nomination dossier for Harmandir Sahib, we began with, there's 6 criterias under the cultural criterias for nominating a cultural heritage site for World Heritage. So we began with looking at, that Harmandir Sahib as a piece of very unique architecture or representing a community and so on and so forth. And it's only mid-course that we realized that the most important aspect of Harmandir Sahib is the holy book that sits inside the shrine, because that embodies that heritage is around which all material culture rallies. So that happened. This particular work that I did was in 2002 with a multidisciplinary team, and it was one of the most amazing learnings for me at that point. And that's when even Raghu came and photographed the Golden Temple quite extensively. Even, it was around the same time when even did the aerial photography of Harmandir Sahib. And that was something very, very special. So I realized that all the principles that the Sikh gurus taught or represented in terms of human dignity, equality, equity, and justice, social justice, and all of that, those principles are around which the entire 500 years of history of Amritsar kind of gets all wraps itself around. So whether it is the freedom movement, or whether it is Maharaja Ranjit Singh and subsequently the Anglo-Sikh Wars, or whether it is a work ethic or the poetry of Nanak Singh and Bhai Veer Singh and the poets, or the ethic of the art and craft movement, what you see in Bhai Ram Singh and his architecture, and what he was, and the movement to, for the Chief Khalsa Diwan doing the schools. So I realized that all of this kind of goes fundamentally around the principles that are embodied, in the Sikh faith, or you can say that Harmandir Sahib.
Yeah. So in one way, the book, and it's not just a book, it's quite a tome, right? I don't know if you have it with you and if you can lift it to show the audience what it looks like, but it's quite a beautifully produced book, and it's something that you will look at, you will read. It's quite a book. But what I wanted to sort of underscore is that, yes, it has these 11 essays, which give you such rich glimpses into, such detailed glimpses into various aspects of the city. But then there's a parallel narrative, which, the way I read it, it works in 2 ways. So there is this long photographic preface to the book before you even read a single word. And then you look at all the other visuals in the book, which are both photographs and archival material. And I was just wondering if I could switch for a little bit to Mr. Raghurai and ask you, what was the narrative you were hoping to build in that preface? Was that something that, I know that the photographs in the book draw from your long relationship with the city. So how was that section put together?
Meeta has put together, edited it for herself as per her understanding of the city, but nevertheless, you see, I carry wild energy. And that wild energy, when I'm photographing, I discovered that spiritual energy has to come in to control that wild energy and give it an expression. Amritsar, even during Bhindranwale's time, when he used to live in that complex, I was with India Today, and once a week, at least once a month, we'll go to Amritsar and meet him and smell around the place and see what's going on. And a violent man with violent ideas, because he needed power. thanks to those politicians of that time who propped him up and put him there. But the fact was that even during those periods when he was there and his men carrying guns everywhere, you walk into the complex of the Golden Temple, the Holy Walk inside, and the inner sanctum. It always had the magic of peace and spirituality. And that is very precious to me. And, you know, after taking pictures, that was one place where I leave my camera and sit down and wait for the divine, who never came to meet me. But the energy was there. So, plus, even before that, you know, I was asked to do a book on the Sikhism, which we did. And Amritsar is like a Mecca for the Sikhs, you know, the most holiest shrine, and it truly is the holiest. And that's the magic. And the faith is unbelievable. If somebody asks me, are you a religious person? What kind of faith you have? I'm not a religious person. But my faith lies in the eyes of the people I photograph, because they enrich me with their energy and expression when they connect with the Lord. So Amritsar has been very important to me. And this lady of mine, she's done so much work on so many, she's done concept for a LoRa. She's just finished Parliament, you know, in connection with the Central Vista, the restoration, how to restore Parliament and other things. She's worked on that. She's worked on so many important aspects. For me, even if I have to spend a week on any subject, I say there is a book. And without a book, I'm not working. And this lady, she does so much, leaves it there. And you see, even exhibitions come and disappear. But book is a permanent record of what we've experienced, what we've understood, you know. So this is, and her dedication, and she's a very good Sardarni, dedicated Sardarni. And she makes everybody bow down and listen to the kirtans. And those kirtans are also beautiful. So you see, she's done so much work. So I told her, I said, why don't you do this book? And by the way, this is my maybe 54th book or 5th book, or I don't know how many, I can't count them.
Google says 57. So
but a couple of my friends, important friends, tell me, Raghu, this is your best book. Because,
and it's not your book.
Yeah, because it's well researched. Apart from the visual experience, visual language, which is very quick, you see good picture, good expression, whatever is happening in the picture. When you read the text, it enriches you with the history, with the spirituality, with the ongoing affair of the place. So together, this has been very fulfilling. And basically, I gave her my best pictures of Amritsar, of Harmandir Sahib, and I said, you choose it according to your journey and your insights you've had after spending so many years. So this is how it is there.
So actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking back to the pictures in the book, and it struck me that, and perhaps Gurmeet, you can speak to this, that there's so many pictures of reconstruction, and there's so many pictures of the Harmandir Sahib and you know, the entire building whole. And so the effect of that is to think about rebuilding rather than destruction, although we know that there have been periods of extreme destruction, right? So, and I'm wondering if that was a conscious choice because you are talking about heritage conservation, or was that just incidental?
No, so when you say rebuilding, what comes to your mind? Which image comes to your mind?
Well, I'm thinking of like the sevaks, carrying materials, the fact that it is such a huge community effort, and there is, even in those pictures, which must have been the aftermath of extreme trauma, of having seen a building destroyed, there seems to be joy in the rebuilding. And so I was wondering if that was a conscious sort of choice, or is it just something I'm reading into the pictures?
I'm so glad you've asked this question, Usha. See, this is what I would say, that when I was talking about decolonize our way of looking at heritage conservation. Now, material authenticity is kind of very important. I mean, for me, the historic fabric is very important, as what it embodies. But having said that, what my big learning about working in Amritsar and working in Punjab is that the moment the state comes in, it disconnects people from their culture. I'm not saying heritage here, I'm saying about from their culture.
Yeah.
And heritage is the physical manifestation, culture is a living dynamic process. We tend to say, okay, in India, our culture is alive and vibrant, but when we come down to protecting our heritage, we don't want that vibrant culture to have a relationship with that material culture. Yeah. We kind of say, nahi, unko nahi, hum batayenge kaise karna hai, kind of a thing. When we were nominating Harmandir Sahib as a World Heritage Site, when I spoke about that criteria 6, which is about the Holy Book, we also had to define, the World Heritage nomination actually needed us to define the authenticity and integrity of the place. And what learning I had, what kind of revealed itself to me was that if the principles of the faith are followed, then you have an authentic site. Now, in a sacred site like Harmandir Sahib, seva, whether it's in the kitchen or whether it is desilting of the sarovar, or whether it comes down to restoring the wall paintings of the shrine, we are dealing with people who are engaging with the site and with an act of voluntary offering themselves. In fact, seva can be in tan, man, or dhan. It can be bodily engagement. It can be through your mind, or it can be through an offering of, some sort of
resources.
Huh.
You see, after Operation Blue Star, when the Golden Temple was handed over to the Sikhs, so they decided to clean up the Sarovar. क्या बोलते हैं उसको?
कार सेवा.
नहीं, कार सेवा तो yes. And I've at that time Life magazine was still around, so they wanted me to do this story for them. So I read there early morning, and the whole big sarovar around the Golden Temple was emptied out, and it's 15-20 feet deep everywhere. And there were thousands of men, women, and children in their best clothes. And they said, it will take us 2 to 3 days to clean it. And when they did their puja and everything, ardas and prayers, and they said, now go. I tell you, I can't believe my eyes, what I was seeing. That human energy, when it's put together in faith, what all it can do within 4 hours, not 4 days, 4 hours, they were almost digging up the mud from under the sarovar. And they were shouting, please don't do this. It's got done. It's enough. Please stop. In 4 hours, everyone, men, women, children, with such dedication that this was as if they were doing it to their guru right now. And that's the kind of faith these people have.
So coming back to material culture, so what I was trying to say here was that the practice, the process, and the intangible, the value system, which kind of informs an act towards conserving, protecting your heritage, is something which comes from within the community. So in the case of here, where you see so much reconstruction, all of that, now, where does the material authenticity come in? So here, what happens is, like in the case of Harmandir Sahib, if you had to get down to wall painting restoration or application of material, because wear and tear will happen in a shrine or any site because of use and so on. We are not in a place that, there are cathedrals where there's nobody going in, and therefore, you can stay with one type of material for decades. So what we have to ensure, or what needs to be understood by the site managers, is that whatever material you use needs to be compatible with the historic fabric. It has to be scientifically compatible, so that in case you have lime-based material, you don't want to put cement on it, because it is actually going to scientifically be detrimental for the historic material. The other thing you also have to be conscious about in the case of here is there are principles, like in the case of Harmandir Sahib, is the principles of non-violence. Materials which are aligned with the principles of nature. And that's what lime is, that's what earth is, that's what brick would be, as compared to steel, glass, all of these modern materials. So that kind of sympathetic, principles that you should underline your choice of materials and that you use. So what I'm saying is that within continuity, within protection and conservation, continuity of processes is important, and understanding between the community and the scientific community. We come in from the technical scientific community side. So we need to decolonize our tools of heritage conservation, and the answers will come from within the systems, the processes of the community, with a dialogue with the scientific community. So when you see reconstruction here, because in Amritsar, you'll see that pictures of the Seva thing that Raghu just described, that's one part of it. And the other part is, I also believe that our generation, which is now, I'm talking about, be in our 50s and so on, the work that we've done with heritage conservation primarily is to recover heritage. So it's like the Rambagh gate that we restored. There was a police kotwali in it. So the police station had to be rehabilitated, because this is the only surviving gate from the 19th century, from Maharaja Ranjit Singh's time. So recover it. Similarly, the footprint of the Rambagh garden, and we talk about that during the colonial period, if they could destroy the building as an act of subjugation of a community, surely recovery of that building could be recovery of dignity of a community and of the people and their narrative, their historical narrative. And all those people we kind of value, for instance, Maharaja Ranjit Singh himself and his contribution. So that is what. So I feel it's such a dynamic process. What you've lost in the physical form does not mean that, and because of which it has impacted a narrative of a community, you can actually engage with the same site and recover both the physical in a particular way and a sense of dignity of the people of today, and as they engage with that particular site. So it's a very interesting and a very, very enriching process, For us, for me as an architect and somebody who comes from Punjab, it's a huge, huge transformative experience for me as well, as a person.
Yeah. I see that Vijay is back on the screen, but if I could,
I thought he was a good guy.
But I do have just one more question.
No, take your time, Usha. We have about 5 minutes.
Okay, so this has to do with how do you get people to care? Because in some ways, yes, after a traumatic incident, there's a sort of emotional, spiritual urge to give and to recover. So there's that kind of, material recovering of something symbolic. But I mean, Hyderabad is like Amritsar, 500-year-old city. Of course, it doesn't have the spiritual.
Come and do a book on Hyderabad.
Absolutely, you should. I mean, we have some excellent photographers here, and I'm sure your eye would add to the vision of the city. But so to get people to care, and when I say people, not just communities whose dignity, perhaps, as you so beautifully put it, also is recovered in this act of material recovery, but policymakers, funders, politicians, who often play material heritage. They create sides over material heritage. So how does one get people to care?
Usha, this is something which is very close to my heart because it's a recent experience post doing the book. When you look at Jallianwala Bagh, the makeover that they've done to the Jallianwala Bagh, it is appalling.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about, this called for a process. You walk into that alley, and if you've seen images of those mannequins gleefully walking in, people, even somebody who's done a film like Udham Singh has shown that what that gory experience was of the city of Amritsar. The city was under curfew. And what I'm saying is there's so much literature available on Jallianwala Bagh, and look what they've made it out to be. I've written about it, I've spoken about it and all of that. Now you're talking about how do you get people to care? Now people really who need to learn to care is our policymakers, our governments and so on. Did anybody even care to understand what does Jallianwala Bagh mean to the people of Amritsar and to people of Punjab? And even they don't know enough probably. But there's enough. This was an opportunity for the real story to be told to the people of Amritsar, people of Punjab, people of India, to people of the world, what Jallianwala Bagh really is. This was the time when they should have thought of a documentation center like the Germans have done in Berlin.
Yeah.
They've got the Topography of Terror Documentation Center. This was the time. This is when they should have been ambitious and done a center like that. There is a memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. Look what it does to people. The way when you go to that particular site. Here, when you go into Jallianwala Bagh, when you see those mannequins, you walk into that passage, you think you've come to a Mela ground, to some theme park. And the reason being that we as designers, architects and all of that, only know how to use tools to celebrate history. We like that jingoism. So with those tools of those mannequins and that all gleeful and laser shows and all of that, you've made a spectacle of a place. That place did not deserve that. That was a place of mourning. That was a place of remembrance. We in India we have not developed our tools as tools for remembrance of, and that is why, and the process should have involved the people of Amritsar. There should have been a lot of discussions and conversations with youth, with people to arrive at what should go into Jallianwala Bagh when you're commemorating 100 years of that massacre, which was the turning point of the history of the freedom struggle in India. So I would say that itself tells you where we are going wrong and where we have gone wrong. And these things can be rectified as well. And it is even better if we were to now say, okay, Punjab government and government of India say, okay, we made a board chop, let's fix it. And that there'll be so many more people will look at it and learn from it because you acknowledge that you've done something wrong. We talk about that the British should actually apologize to what happened to Jallianwala Bagh. I think our governments owe an apology to what they've done to the site right now.
Absolutely.
And many other sites probably
Many
as well.
others.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of making people care, I mean, Raghu Raiji's pictures have made people care, but then what happens then to that caring, right? One needs to sort of gather that emotion and do something with it. And yeah, Jallianwala Bagh and the space has been just a Yeah, it is, as you say, appalling. So maybe I should now hand it back to Vijay and allow people in the audience to ask questions. But yeah,
thank you so
I
much.
could go on. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we could also go on listening, but unfortunately, yeah, what you said about Jallianwala Bagh also, reminds us about the moment you hear government undertaking conservation, everybody dreads the possibility of what will happen. Instead of feeling happy, we all have our apprehensions about what is going to be the end result of this governmentality, right? So yeah, unfortunate, and we have seen examples of that not only in Amritsar but in every part of India, I suppose. And
but Vijay, I would say there's some good examples as well. So I just feel that there needs to be a dialogue between the civil society and the government officers, whoever is there at the helm of affairs.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned governmentality, which assumes that they know everything. That is the problem. And there is one, there are several comments and in the chat box, and as one would expect, lots of photo studios have been watching this program, and they're all saying, how lovely to see Raghuraj on HLF platform. And one question, this is by Rajkumar Hans, who is asking, Amritsar was inhabited by a large number of Muslims who vanished due to the Holocaust of partition. Would you throw some light on this facet of the city?
It's one of those very, very, terrible chapters of the history of India. The partition of India in 1947. In fact, we have a chapter, an essay by Urvashi Butalia, and what she brings out through some personal stories. And, what can one say? 50% of the population changed overnight. And, it's like what again, I would get that reference of the Germans in here. Till the 1990s, the narrative of Germany was that we were, that about what had happened with the Allied, I think the Allied forces was that we were something to do with to take ownership that we were perpetrators of violence. And therefore, we need to acknowledge the violent history of ours, and not just that we were the victims of the World War. That shift of narrative happened in the 1990s because the youth started questioning. And what has happened in India is that we feel that when partition happened, we were the ones who suffered, but we do not acknowledge that we are also perpetrators of violence. We also did as much wrong to the other as much as our own people from this side of India experienced. Now, my grandparents also came from Lahore. They lost everything when they came here. But so as far as partition, so till we acknowledge that we were also perpetrators of violence, we cannot put the wrong right. And that's why in the essay by Urvashi Butalia, she talks about the violence of both sides, and everybody suffers. And this is something which, when I'm deviating from this question, just to say that one thing we wanted to do in this book, in all the sections, was that we wanted to talk about a solution as well. So she kind of says this. She says, is it expecting too much when you look at the different peace parks that have been done in other parts of the world, and the memorials that have been done, and what the German, I kind of really, I'm so impressed by the Germans, the way they have taken ownership of the Jewish Holocaust. And the fact that, she says, would it be expecting too much that one day in Harmandir Sahib, there is ardas done for the people, the Muslims, and everybody who actually lost their lives during the 1947 partition? And would it be asking too much if in Lahore, from their Jami Masjid, they do one day of a memorial to the people who lost their lives while on that land?
Very good.
you know, it is something, but unless we acknowledge each other's losses, I don't think there's going to be any pain is going to be solved. So just writing about it and talking about it on TV and sloganeering about it is not going to get a closure.
Yeah.
Blood, of course, there was a lot of blood shed. In fact, in Punjab, you know, when you drive in the landscape of Punjab, you will see a lot of these graves with the green cloth on it. And on Thursdays, people go and put diyas and they put oil and all of that. So when I was doing one project 20 years ago along the Grand Trunk Road, and I said, you know, who was buried here? Because I thought they were Muslims, you know, that. So then I was explained that, look, there is nobody's, it's not a grave of anybody. They said it is only to memorialize that this land has seen so much bloodshed. This is just to, you know, dignity to those people who were, you know, who lost their lives. So that is to the Shaheed. It's for the Shaheed. And the Shaheed is depicted in a grave. It's not depicted in a Sikh way or the Hindu way, but in the Islamic way. So the Punjab landscape is full of these, you know, these memorials.
Yeah.
So that's how people are, you know, memorializing that.
Very touching. The next two questions are from Vikas Singh, and these are to Raghu ji. Is the story behind the picture important, or is it the angle of the picture? And secondly, and I mean, if there is one picture, yes, please go ahead, sir.
You see, without content, no angle, no quality makes damn difference.
Great.
So the feeling, the responses from the, you see, I said the situation, when you make yourself available mentally, physically, and spiritually, you go to a situation and you make yourself available, then situations begin to speak to you. And listening to those whispers and taking photographs brings out the magic. The angle is a small process. It, you know, when these emotions touch you deep down, they also tell you where we stand now and what angle you need to take. You know?
And secondly, again, same Vikas Singh is asking, Raghu ji, if there is one picture that you would like to shoot again, which would that be and why?
Okay, first of all, sometimes people see if I have taken some very good picture and they see, and they say, what were you thinking at that time? I never think. You see, Baniyas, politicians, and maybe
Baniyas, don't say Baniyas, he means businessmen.
Businessmen and politicians and maybe scientists and those kind of people, they put together the data and they think and plan. Creative mind never thinks and waits for the energies to touch you and then respond. The problem is that we become programmed human machines with the ideas. Ideas can give you a hint of doing things, but the magic has to come from above. And for that, you have to be available really and sensitive enough to get the signals, receive the signals and respond. Signals are more important than story ideas.
Yeah, great.
So
one last comment, and this is Amita Desai, my colleague, HLF colleague, is asking, we take you on your promise, Raghu ji, that your next book would be on Hyderabad, and Gurmeet ji with your research accompanying that. But people are interested to know, next to Hyderabad, what else is on your plate?
Yes, tell them. You know, she was doing Allura.
Sorry, next to Hyderabad.
No, because Hyderabad is now given.
Okay.
Now, you are going to do the next book on Hyderabad, but after that, what?
She spent months and months in Allura.
Few years actually. No, so what we're trying to put together is a book on Ajanta and Ellora. And because I was involved in preparing the site management plan for the Ellora Caves for the Archaeological Survey of India. This was about 10 years ago. And Ajanta, of course, is a most spectacular, amazing site. I don't know anything about it. So somebody else would work on Ajanta with Raghu. So we are working on
Ajanta and Ellora.
a 2-volume, you know.
Wow.
But you know,
That would be something.
Yeah, Ajanta is known for the wall paintings of Buddhist time, you know. And the fact is that again, here ASI, they put tungsten light and mercury light to light up the paintings partially. It's like psychedelic lights on the walls. And when you take pictures, you see, you go anywhere in the world to any best museum, the lighting is balanced for the daylight so that you get to see the original colors of the paintings. And here they've created such a chaos inside, they don't even know the kind of lighting they've put. And they only have one excuse that, oh, you can't take lights inside because it's very sensitive inside. The paintings, you know, the photographs I took 25 years ago inside Ajanta with an ordinary camera, the color quality is much better. And now that we are doing a book, it's all brownish mercury lights. And if you ask for permission, they say, no, 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 we can't do this. Really horrible. But Ajanta has become more famous. And it's story after story in the wall paintings. And let me tell you, half of those wall paintings, more than half are destroyed. But going to Ellora is a divine experience, from Buddhist to Hindu caves to Jain caves. Oh, mesmerizing experience. And I promise you, when we bring out that book, people will really get to see the experience, what those guys in those centuries dug into the caves and
Dug into the rocks.
And the sculptures and the atmosphere they have created. And every sculpture, every column, everything is so beautifully done, as if they had perfect machines working for them. And these guys, they can't even manage.
Yeah, I think that's a very...
There are bats flying inside and outside in our heritage sites.
Yeah, I think this book that you tell us about, the 2-volume book, I think that's a wonderful optimistic note to end on, you know, after the horrors of the revamped Jallianwala Bagh, etc., etc. I think this is a wonderful note to end this session on. Thank you so much, Raghuraj and Gurmeet.
You are very smart. You are making it sound very wonderful to end the show. Thank you very much. You are caught.
Well, all good things have to come to an end, unfortunately. And so, thank you very much.
I thought we've just begun.
It
shall go on.
The best conversations sound like they've just begun when
absolutely, and the conversation should go on. Thank you very much.
And Usha, thank you so much.
All the best.
Thank you very much.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Kavya Dhara. In this session, poetry will flow and we will be having a very good, interesting discussion on the book Acrobat, written by, the poems are written by Nabaneeta Devsen and translated by her daughter, Nandana Devsen. I'm conscious that I have to introduce some very illustrious people here, but then I will first start with Chandana Chakrabarti, who is going to be in conversation with Nandana. Chandana is a science communicator, writer, activist, and actor. She is on the board of Manthan, the Forum for Public Discourse. She is a moderator, an anchor, and a compere par excellence. She is closely associated with HLF since it began. And I'm now going to introduce the legendary Nabaneeta Devsen, who passed away in 2019. She remains one of the most beloved, versatile, and prolific Bengali writers of all time. She published her first book of poems at the age of 21 and grew to be immensely popular in every genre. Equally expressive in poetry and prose, fiction and non-fiction, she has over 100 books to her credit. Nabaneeta Devsen lived a parallel life as a highly acclaimed international scholar and feminist and a distinguished professor of comparative literature and won several awards. A tireless mentor to students and young writers, Nabaneeta Devsen was the founder and president of the West Bengal Women Writers Association, SOI. Nandana Devsen is an award-winning actor, child rights activist, author of 6 children's books, which have been translated into 15 languages globally. She grew up in India, England, and America, and has starred in 20 feature films from 4 continents and in multiple languages. Her first book, Kangaroo Kisses, was selected by 320 UK nurseries as a book of excellence, and her interactive workshops have been loved by more than 30,000 young people across the world. She is a brand ambassador, child protection for Save the Children India. She is brand ambassador, child protection for Save the Children India. Her latest publication, Acrobat, which is the topic of discussion in this session today, 2021, is a translation of her mother, Nabaneeta Devsen's poems. Now I would like to introduce the book in the words of 2 people who capture the essence of the book. Kartika Nair writes, Nabaneeta Devsen's Acrobat is that rare, majestic creature, a book that, through every page, underscores the quiet, high-wire act required from the poet. It is a feat whose complexity is only matched by its mastery in inhabiting the multiple selves of the artist, daughter, lover, mother, translator, scholar, and more. Here are poems that capture the pleasures and trials of the human experience: desire, decay, mortality, childbirth, bereavement, wonder, with unsparing detail and sensitivity, and celebrate the gift of language which helps us transcend them. Amitabh Ghosh writes about the translation itself. These translations of Nabaneeta Devsen's poems capture her quirky yet profound voice so beautifully that I felt I could hear her reading them aloud. These are the poems of an adventurous and indefatigable traveler, observing the world with deep understanding and sympathy through the prism of a sensibility that is securely rooted in the culture of Bengal. Now, Nandana, can I request you to please hold up the book for our audience?
Yes. I'm sorry, it has all my stickies on it. But
that's very nice.
This is the one. It came out in England and America, in America first, and then in England in the summer. And that has a different one, which I love both covers equally. This one is a painting you'll recognize by Rabindranath Tagore. And my mother and I had actually selected the image together. And this is such a stunning piece of art, and so strongly and evocatively connected to the title. So yeah, those are the covers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Now, Chandana, the session is all yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Kinara. Are we going to run the montage now?
Yes, that would be lovely.
Yes. Warm welcome to you, Nandana.
Thank you.
We're indeed very happy to have you with us on this forum today. And I'm especially glad to be in conversation with you about Acrobat, your book of poems by your mother, Nabaneeta Devsen, where you have curated and translated from Bangla into English poems that span 6 decades of Nabaneeta De's work. It has, of course, been a labor of love for you, and also perhaps tremendously painful for you personally, because you would have so wanted your mother to be here today.
Yes.
Nabaneeta Dee was a well-known feminist and a fiercely independent woman, unafraid to share her innermost feelings and thoughts through the words that she wove into her poems. She wrote fiction, non-fiction, feminist essays, children's books, and travelogues, equally comfortable in both the languages, Bangla and English. Here is a woman who expressed pain through her poetry and joie de vivre, which she had in abundance through her prose. In your introduction in the book, Nandana, you write, and I quote you, poetry brought Nabaneeta the kind of freedom that was most precious to her, the freedom to explore her own broken voice. It gave her the freedom to reach out to a large and responsive audience, to discover another kind of love. You further write, and I quote you again, poetry paved for her a private route to healing. It unveiled her deepest emotions. Throughout her life, poetry empowered her to find and keep her balance during upheavals of every kind, whether it was the ferocity of love or the anxiety of motherhood, the shock of rejection, or the grief of bereavement, the despair of communal violence, or the outrage of gender-based injustices, all of which developed into abiding themes in her poetry. So Nandana, without further ado, may I invite you to read a few of her poems, the ones that have been selected, perhaps some in Bangla, and then you can read the translation in English. Can we begin with her poem Acrobat, because the book is named after that poem, and 5 other poems that have to do with child, daughter, mother, and disappointment. So over to you, Nandana.
May I say that I'm so delighted by the selection of poems that you've made, Chandana. You've curated the reading of the poetry today, and I'm really grateful to you because it's a stunning selection. Thank you also for that very beautiful introduction to my mother's work. And I want to give a big thank you to the Hyderabad Lit Fest, to Kinara for her lovely introduction, and for Amita and Siddhika, who've been working really hard to make this festival as wonderful as it is. So it's a delight to be here. And I'm especially thrilled to be in conversation with you, Chandana. It's I don't think it's too often that a Chandana and a Nandana have a chance to have a chat. So this is great. I will begin with, as you requested, Acrobat. And I'll read the Bangla first, and then I'll continue with some short poems in English. Madari. ভেবেছে সে বুঝি খুব সুন্দর মাদারি খেলা জানে, দুহাতে সময়কে নিয়ে লোফালুফি, এখন তখন, দুটোই নাচাবে দুমুঠোতে, হেঁটে যাবে দড়ির ওপরে, ভেবেছে সে সব কিছু পারে। জীবনে একবারই শুধু দড়ি কেঁপে ওঠে। Acrobat. She thought she knew acrobatics rather well, that she could juggle time with both hands, play with the now right next to the then. She would make both dance, she thought, fist to fist, and she would glide so smooth along the tightrope. She thought she could do absolutely anything at all. Only once in your life will the rope shiver. I'll move on to in poetry. Stay alive. Show yourself clearly like an unfailing passport photo. Stay awake in every line, you, like an unquenchable thirst. Yes, you. The pain that tears my heart apart. Show yourself clearly like a flower in full bloom. Don't hide from me as long as I live in poetry. The Lamp, this is one of my favorites. It's a poem that my mother wrote for my grandmother a couple of years, remembering my grandmother a couple of years after she died. Memories on my mother's birthday. Go to sleep now, Ma. It's way past 11. 11? It's still early then. But you must go to bed. You're teaching tomorrow. Ma sits in her easy chair, thick glasses burst on her thin nose, pale fingers clutching her magnifying glass, the statesman spread out across her lap. Next to her on the table, her flask of tea, her medicines, her fragrant betel leaf in its silver case, her brass spittoon, her cash box, behind her on the teapoy, an earthen vase filled with her favorite white tube roses, and a wicker table lamp weaved in agotala. Before her, the alarm clock ticking away, her traveling timepiece. As Ma turns the pages of the newspaper, its noisy crackle splinters the quiet night. Closing my book, I come to her. As soon as I step inside, I drown in the deep perfume of those tube roses. The nurse is dozing in her chair. Ma, please go to sleep now. It's 1:30. 1:30? She scolds. And you're still awake? Don't you have college tomorrow? Swallowing the rebuke, I keep on wheedling. You'll get sick, Ma, if you stay up like this. You must take care of your body. My body? Ma breaks into laughter that sparkles like jewelry shimmering from head to toe. How much more sick can it get? And what use is my body anyway? I go to her one more time before I sleep. It's 2:30, Ma. Do call it a night. Come, let's take you to your bed. Yes, I'm coming, just coming. There's only this one tiny bit left. Reading isn't so easy now, you see. It's the gift of these cataracts. With a slight smile, embarrassed, apologetic, she buries herself again in printed words. Under the glowing light of the table lamp, with her focus on the magnifying glass, the ticking of the alarm clock fades away. As I walk back to my room, I hear her speaking softly to the nurse. No, no, my dear, no, don't turn off that light. Keep the lamp switched on, please. I have just one more page left. Just one more page left. One more paragraph. One more sentence. Give me one more word, dear nurse. Just one more day. This child. This is a poem that my mother wrote shortly after she had her first baby, my sister Antara. I mean, she wrote a lot of happy celebratory poems about motherhood as well, but this is a bit more about the anxiety of motherhood. One day, this child too will die. This child, pure as milk, whom I've brought into this world with all my heart's desire and with fervent prayer. If she asks me now, on what promise have you thrust me into this strange and dazzling world? What grand celebration must I attend? I will be petrified. Choking with fear, with ignorance, I will run away to a dark cave, numb and empty. What answer will I give you? Great Fair. This is a poem that she wrote in the 70s. You would take me to the great fair. You had promised. This way. I'd buy a bamboo flute splashed with colors, a small chariot, 2 clay horses, little pots and pans, toys, a mask, a golden-haired, glass-eyed doll, making a list long enough to buy up the whole fair, filling up my little cup with all the coins I'd saved. I waited for you on my steps. You were going to come back and take me with you to the great fair. As I waited on my steps, my limbs grew long. My list blew away in the wind. My cup of change became a trunk of gold. There is nothing left for me to buy from your great fair anymore. I'm going to get up from my steps now. And the last one in this section that you selected, Chandana, is Broken Home.
Yeah.
Once again, you glow on the brink of love. Once again, you're dazzling in heartbreak. Is it for the sake of poetry, then, that once again you're hunting for pain? Do you break your home just for poetry, time and again?
Thank you so much, Nandana. You know, I've read these poems over and over again, but let me tell you, you're reading it, you embellished it with your voice. Thank you so much. They're so good. I'm going to leave you with a few comments and questions, and you can expound on that after this. So Acrobat was all about tightrope walking.
Mm-hmm.
Life is tightrope walking for most people in one way or the other. So it's so universally applicable. And the last line says, if you slip, you don't get a second chance.
Right.
That's absolutely wonderful and universally applicable, as I said, not gender specific at all.
Right.
How many people, how many writers, poets can be so fearlessly honest and transparent about one's innermost feelings as she exhorts herself in the second poem in poetry. Be truthful, be honest. Don't be worried about, covering your emotions. Don't hide.
Yeah.
Then this child, as you said, when I read it, you mentioned now that she was worried about, Antara when she was born.
I think she was worried about the, I don't think she was worried about Antara, but she was worried about the fact that she now holds the responsibility of bringing a life, a vulnerable young life into a world that was broken, So it was less about my sister, but it was more about the fact that she was transitioning into a different phase in her life.
So you know what that made me feel like? I said, today, every mother will worry, what kind of a world are we bringing our children into, So that's the kind of chord that it struck in me. And I wanted to ask you, she of course celebrated the fact that you both were born, etc. But I'm sure she was very worried about,
About the,
battlefield,
yeah, what
yes.
that meant. What
And she
that
was
meant.
very, very sensitive to what was happening socially around her world, in her own life, etc., etc. The Great Fair. What a vivid poem that is. A child's disappointment. And when that moment passes where your desire doesn't mean anything more, what is left is just disappointment. That was beautiful. Very, very pertinent. I love the lamp. It creates such a visual. Actually, the poem is about your grandma, but I can see your ma there. Would you agree? I mean, if you were to write about your mother, I'm sure you'd have a similar kind of a picture. Give me a little more time. I'm doing this. Let me finish this work. You know, that kind of a thing.
My Didi and I would both attest to the fact that she became exactly like Ardima when she was really ill. And, you know, she was writing her columns till the last couple of weeks before she died. She signed the contract for Acrobat again 2 weeks before she passed away. She was checking the cover. She was reading constantly. So this, when I was translating it, when I'd read it, it had always been a poem that my mother wrote about my grandmother. But when I was translating it, because you have to find the words for that kind of vulnerability on both sides, the vulnerability that she felt as a daughter and the helplessness that my grandmother felt as a mother. I mean, the help as someone who is aging and has limited time, and there's still so much she wants to do and read, and she had an insatiable appetite for learning. So, you know, when you try to find your own words for it, you realize. So when I translated, the translation is, to me, feels like a poem about my mother and me, even though the original, of course, is a poem about my mother and my grandmother.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we all become our mothers at some point. That kind of saying is true. Certainly has been true in our lives.
The last poem that you read, Broken Home, it's quite clear that her pain produced poetry. Was she in search of pain to be inspired again and again? That's my question to you. So
yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a question she asked herself. I don't think she answered that. And I don't think she was actually someone who, she was a very life-affirming kind of optimistic, positive. She had a lot of very positive life force about her. So I don't think she went looking for pain, but I think when pain came to her, she converted it into art, as artists often do, right? So there ended up being some kind of a symbiotic connection between pain and poetry in her life. And I think this is a question she was asking. She was wondering. She was it's a self-reflective poem, not that she knew the answer to it, but the idea of needing to have pain to be able to create poetry. How strong is that connection, that need? How much is your poetry dependent on pain, right? Is a question she was asking herself, I think. And it's interesting, I mean, which is the first? Like, is it the pain that, is it because you have pain that you write poetry, or is it because you need to write poetry that you find the pain in your life, right? That's a question she's asking here, but I don't think she had an answer for herself to that. And I'm also not entirely sure if she was writing it about herself or about, in a more metaphorical and general way, about the process of poetry. It could be the you, could be herself, but it could be a poet. It could be a universal poet, and it could be a question that's asked, that she's asking the universal poet. I just want to go back to what you said so beautifully about the poem, The Great Fair, which I love. You know, there was a part of Ma that never grew up. There was a beautiful innocence about her, which there was a kind of childlike faith in, even though she was extremely rooted in the reality of the political situation and the inequities that we live with. She she had this faith, this kind of innocent, a kind of guileless and beguiling view of the world. And I think she often seemed to be surprised by the fact that she was a grown-up person. You know, she was surprised by the fact that somehow she had stayed the same. She was still that child, but the world had somehow grown up around her, along with the length of her limbs and what she wanted to do with her time, and everything that was important to her was still important to her, but was not considered important by the world, right? So that poetry, to me, was written at a particular time, but it felt like one of the truest poems about basically her personality, where she was always a bit taken aback by how much of a child she was still in response to how grown up the world was around her.
And why did you choose to name the book Acrobat?
That's an interesting story. You know, so when I first translated Acrobat, I actually translated it for this book, which is called Make Up Your Mind. I don't know if you can see it properly. It's a translation of her last kind of book of new poetry, which was called Tumi Mono Sthir Karo. And I wanted to translate it as a surprise birthday present for her 75th birthday. So I was translating this. Actually, I had just got married, so this was a project I had on my honeymoon. So I was translating all this poetry, and in Spain, my husband was extremely patient, but I couldn't ask my mother if I had any questions about the rightness or wrongness of words. So as you said earlier about the gender, you know, in Bangla, the third person pronoun is not gendered, right? She could be chile or me, but in English, of course, it's a he or a she, and I needed to choose one. You weren't using Z at that time yet, nor were you using they at that time yet in the way that you do now. And in any case, it wouldn't fit in a poem. So I looked at the poem, and to me, I had always, I mean, this is the beauty of how poetry changes meaning depending on who reads it. I always saw the poem as a feminist poem, as a poem about the multitasking that every woman has to do to survive, and the juggling of time. So to me, it was about the multiplicity of identities that a woman has to inhabit to stay stable. So I made it a she. But once the book was no longer a surprise and I gave it to my mother, she loved all the translations, and I drew attention to this one and said, look, I had to make this choice. I made it a she. Do you think that was a she or a he? I mean, what was the gender of the acrobat? And she said, kind of like you said, that actually the gender is a material in this case. I wasn't thinking about a he or a she, because for me, this was actually about the delicate act of a poet. It was not about life struggles. It was about creative struggles. So it's about the fact that a line too long or a word too heavy can throw you off the rope. And once that happens, you can never really get the poem back. The poetry runs away from you, the poetry crashes. So I thought that was so fascinating. And I said, okay, Ma, let me rewrite the translation. And she said, no, because it works wonderfully as a feminist poem. So, and you know, it could also work as it's not the she, it's just that it adds another layer to it without taking anything away from it. So when we were thinking of what to call the book, Ma and I, when we were brainstorming, I suggested Acrobat, and she loved it because she remembered that there was my interpretation of an acrobat, and there was hers, and that the book worked in both senses. It was both a book about the many conflicting identities that a woman has to embrace, as well as the delicate balancing act that every poet has to go through. So that's why we named it.
Wonderful. That's absolutely apt name for the book. Can we take on the second set of poems?
Right, absolutely. And you selected in this section, you selected poems in rhyme.
That's right.
So
and some of those rhymes are difficult rhymes, so you can talk about them later. Yes.
Exactly. Okay. Let me start with this one. I'll read in Bangla as well. It'll be easy to hear the music.
Chando.
The chando, the rhythm. So let me find that.
I think I selected Out of Reach for you.
You did.
As the first one. It's on page 71.
I'm just trying to find the Bangla, you see.
Oh, okay.
So I know I had a big heart on it because it's a love poem. But it seems to have dropped off.
Or you could do, you could take the second one and we'll come back to Out of Reach.
Okay.
The Bangla is really out of reach now, huh, Nandana?
I know I can find it very easily. It's just I'm annoyed because I actually marked it and I think it dropped off somehow in this flurry of, you know, like all these, it just dropped off from here. But why is it not? I cannot find it. Okay. I got it. Here, it got curled up. ভালোবাসা 12 তুমি চেয়েছিলে নিরুপাধি প্রেম অনধিগম্য আমি গেথে আনি লবঙ্গ লতা তোমারই জন্য তুমি বুঝি চাও প্রেমের বাতাস নাতিশীতোষ্ণ আমি বইয়ে দি কাল বৈশাখী ভয়াল কৃষ্ণ তোমার প্রণয় প্রযুক্ত নয় দূর বিশুদ্ধ আমার প্রণয় কিছুটা প্রণয় কিছুটা যুদ্ধ.
Wonderful.
Out of reach. You asked for a nameless love, out of reach. I weaved you a wreath of blooms, each to each. You want love's temperate breeze softly sighing. I blow you a dark thunderstorm, terrifying. Your love is detached, afar, chaste to its core. My love is in part love and in part war. First confidence. This was actually one of my mother's first poem. I mean, it came out in her first book of poetry, which was called Pratham Pratyay, or First Confidence. So this was a poem she wrote in her as a teenager. It came out when she was 21. Rain sweeps through my drapes this monsoon morning as curtains toss. Every door flies open toward the past. The dry leaves melt away, soaking wet. The footprints now lie hidden in moss. I unfold my face into the rain. I wrap my body in drenched hair. Now, lifting my eyes, I stand tall. And in this free and weightless light, I say with confidence for the first time, I have forgotten all. Sometimes love. You have to hear carefully for the rhymes in this one. They're very tricky. It comes when called, like a pet cockatoo. It sits on my finger, fluttering. It sways its neck, fluffs its feathers, swings its crest, and recites its practiced lines, uttering every pleasing word. My lily white bird repeats to me all that it's been taught and sings best. Saying just what I want to hear, it pours honey into my ear. But behind my back, soon after, alone, perched on its base, my lily white bird clatters its shiny shackles as it cackles with laughter, shedding feathers in empty space. Okay. We have a beautiful one by Lal Ded that my mother, she spent a lot of time in her life translating. She was a real language activist, and she loved translating poetry from across the world, especially women's poetry. And she also spent a lot of time translating women poets within India. In fact, she's translated from Telugu, she's translated from Kannada. This one is called Crushed, and it's not exactly a translation, but it's a poem that she wrote that was inspired by a poem by the 14th century Kashmiri mystic Lal Ded. I put all of my heart in a mortar and pestle, crush it into parts, and then chew it well. I keep a cool head, but I cannot tell, am I living or dead? I'm going to read Growing Up lesson, which, where is it? Okay. Growing Up lesson. Boy, are you scared of bloodshed? Are you terrified of plucking virginity? If the taste of blood goes to your head, do you fear that it will be a calamity? The truth is, whether wrong or right, your blood calls out to you each night. Listen, boy, it's time for you to grow. Words can be as fierce, don't you know? The treachery that lingers on tongue tips, beyond the world that all your dreams show, know that blood can be easily shed by lips. This is a rhyming poem about a boy. I'm going to read a poem about a girl, which is called Cloud. Let's see, where is Cloud? Yeah. Cloud. That girl, she wishes she were a bird. Today she thinks she'll be an eagle. Tomorrow she wants to be a seagull. That girl is very stubborn. She's determined to spread her wings and fly, both on the ocean and high in the sky. But what should she touch first, water or air? So she becomes a sea breeze on her quest, then a wave's salty kiss on the wind's breast. That girl is very stubborn. In the end, she made good on her pledge. She's that rain cloud on the northeast edge. And I'll end with the sixth poem is one of her most iconic poems, again, with a very particular and difficult rhyming and rhythmic structure. The rhyme scheme as well as the metrical pattern is quite classical in this one, as is the language. So it was a really fun challenge to translate this one. Bangla is called Eikal Chirokal, right now, forever. Time has not the power to extinguish me. Don't think for a moment that I wait upon time. Let time keep on playing his absurd battle game. Every time he strips me, I rise clothed without shame. With the force of prayer, of spells magic and divine, all that was untimely will turn auspicious, sublime. In a just war, the rebel stands forever unafraid, for her ally is eternity, who, divinely arrayed, guides her chariot, destroying the enemy line. Thus, a divisive age will be defeated and spurned. Though it brings on great wars, it will lose every time. From all our scriptures, this is the truth I have learned. Please know that I am cherished by an undivided, infinite age. Time will never have the power to scorch me with its rage.
Thank you, Nandana. I actually see the courageous, unflappable Nabaneeta Di in her poem, Right Now Forever, which you read last. Girl, you read that girl. Did Nabaneeta Di see herself as that girl, very stubborn, determined to spread her wings and fly, as someone who made good on her pledge?
Yes, I think she definitely saw herself as someone who was constantly reinventing herself as she did, and kept that promise of being true to herself. Kept that promise, made that promise good. Yeah, and I think just the fact that, I think what was unique about this shape shifting that she did as an artist is that it's not that she was shifting into shapes that were less true to who she was or more true to who she was. They were all equally true. So the kind of joyful, exuberant self that you spoke about, that is so infectious in her prose, was as true to who she was from deeply within her, as was the soulful, heartbreaking, often disturbing poetry that she wrote, through which she found a way of expressing her pain. And I didn't really have a full understanding of how much pain there was in her life until I translated her poetry. So, but that was also very true to her. And I think what was unique about her is that it wasn't like she was changing costumes and, and that sort of changing characters temporarily. I think she reinvented herself as an artist several times, and then many of her artistic personas existed side by side, and they were all absolutely authentic to who she was.
Why did she call her love, part war in Out of Reach?
I think that is what it was like for her. I think, what's interesting about it is that I think she was first of all, I think it's a very breezy, kind of almost lighthearted love poem, like a kind of call and response between two lovers, where, we often say, I love you more. No, I love you more, but I love you this way, but you don't do that. And I would do this for you, but you wouldn't do that for me. There's a sense of that kind of repartee in the poem, but there's something deeper about it, which I think she really believed, which was that it is impossible to have love without war. And we felt that in our relationship within the family. In our family, I grew up in an all-female family with my mother, my grandmother, my sister, and me. And we were an intensely close, very, very close and loving family. But there was a lot of arguing and fighting between us. We were all very headstrong, extremely opinionated, extremely stubborn, like that girl in her poem, right? So I think because of all of that, we understood at an early age not to get really freaked out if there were elements of conflict in your love, that love and conflict can exist at the same time. And I think that gave us a lot of strength, actually, and flexibility in dealing with people, dealing with disagreement, dealing with conflict. Yeah.
Wonderful. Kinara, if we have a little more time, can we take up a few more poems? Great. Okay. So
yes, we have 8 minutes, so probably a couple minutes more you can take up.
Wonderful. Because this section has a lovely poem, and I'd love you to read that, Return of the Dead, but I think that's the one that you're reading last, right? So yes. Can we take the third set of selections you made?
Yeah. So should we, I know you also wanted me to read a little bit from the letter. So should we do the Return of the Dead and then go to the letter? What do you think?
That's right. And if there's time, then we'll do the other ones. I would like you to read the letter. So Return of the Dead.
Okay.
Are you doing that in Bangla as well? No.
I could. I mean, that's a very.
If you haven't read it.
You had wanted, maybe I can do both. You had wanted me to read the happy poem Mountain in Bangla.
That's right. So
but-
do that. Do Mountain and Return of the Dead. You can do Mountain only in Bangla and English. Return of the Dead is a little long, so we save a little time.
Mountain. It is. 22. Okay. This is again one of her early poems and one of her rare happy poems. Pahad. Keu boluk na boluk, tumi shob jano. Tobu kothao pahad ache, choto kotha, boro kotha, choto dukkho, boro bedona, shob chhadiye, masto ek hashir pahad. Ekdin, shei pahade, ঘর বাঁধব তোমার সঙ্গে লোকে বলুক না বলুক তুমি জানো Mountain. Whether they say it or not, you feel it. You feel everything. Somewhere there is a mountain, beyond the small talk, the big words, beyond little sorrows and utter heartbreak. Beyond it all stands a mountain of laughter, of joy. On that mountain, I will build a home with you one day. Whether they say it or not, you feel it. And the last poem in the book is called Return of the Dead. It's a poem that she wrote once when she came back to Kolkata after years of being away, getting married, having us. So when she returned as a young woman whose marriage was falling apart, had 2 young kids, and had to reestablish. Receive me then, Kolkata. I am your true love, your whole world. I'm back from the war, an aborted mother. I have brought the ocean with me instead. My lap is empty, yes, but my breasts are heavy, overflowing with wasted milk. Look at come then, look at me. See how virginity burns on my brow again, fiery as the setting sun. Touch me, for my newborn flesh belongs to you now. Receive me then, Kolkata, in your waiting arms. Your loneliness is over at last. I have returned just as you had wanted me to. Why this stunned silence then? This anxious glance? These days? Lift your face. Don't shift your eyes. Look at me. Your prayers were heard. Here I am, returned from the dead. Yes, it's me, your childhood sweetheart, your world of your own, Nabaneeta.
Nabaneeta Di really treats Kolkata like her lover.
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I loved Mountain because Mountain is all about hope. A mountain of laughter and joy, she says, where she will build her home one day. How beautiful. So may I ask you now to read a little bit from the letter, unless you want to add something about these poems that you just read.
You spoke about them beautifully. I think Mountain also is a poem that she wrote when she was extremely young. She probably wrote it when she was 15, 16. At a time when, I mean, it came out as a book
later.
But, and I know that she was in her first love, relationship as a very kind of child, as a child would have that kind of a love. And I think it talks about all the things that are unsaid at that time. And it's the unsaying that happens not because you're so mature that you don't say things. It's the unsaying that happens sometimes because you don't have the language for it yet and you're too young. So I think what's beautiful about it is this knowledge that even if you're not able to articulate what it is that you want to say, your lover knows it. Your lover knows that this is what what you want. This is the life you see with him. And the other one, I think it's interesting that, you know, when she left India, she was this incredibly glamorous person. She was she was a stellar student. She was going off to study at Harvard on scholarship. She was engaged to someone who was on the brink of becoming an academic superstar. She had a book out, which was very successful. She was a wonderful painter, so she had exhibitions. She was also extremely attractive, so she had a long kind of coterie of admirers and suitors, and everybody was very unhappy that she was moving away. She was sort of seen as a part of the kind of lifeline of the literary artistic community. But when she went back, and when she came back, you know, a lot had happened, and she came back as seemingly a broken person, which she wasn't. No, nothing could ever break her, as that poem Right Now Forever shows. But on the surface, I mean, even though her circle was very progressive, nobody really knew a family that had been divorced. And so I think it was for her a bit of a surprise that the same community that had been so sad about her leaving was just awkward about her return. Not that they didn't want her to return, but they just didn't know how she would fit into the world that she had left behind. So I think that's, instead of, I think a lot of her disappointment and pain and surprise comes through in that poem. Anyway, so let me read a short part of the poem, of the letter. I'll just read the last page, last 2 pages. Although there were unending demands on your time, this is a letter that I wrote to my mother. I actually started writing it to her on her 70th birthday, actually. And it kind of grew. I kept adding to it, and I ended it after she passed away. Although there were unending demands on your time, a few years ago, you had somehow managed to find several days for us to translate together My Bedtime Book for Children, Not Yet. The book is a playful dialogue and rhyme between a mother and a child. A naughty little girl finds countless excuses not to go to bed, while her ever-patient mother is determined to put her to sleep. The literal Bengali translation of Not Yet is Ekhoni na. But you had laughed your own little girl laugh and declared, no, the girl must be much more emphatic. She will say, Ekhoni na, Ekhoni na. Well, this obstinate daughter of yours kept saying to her mother in the last few weeks, Ekhoni na, Ekhoni na. Could you hear me, Ma? Not too long ago, I pulled a big blue book from our Kolkata shelf, 365 bedtime stories. When I opened it, out fell a red gold rush of leaves, oaks, maples, and ferns collected in London when I was a toddler. We had gathered them together in the woods at the bottom of the hill where we lived. One night, as you were reading to me about Tinkerbell, I interrupted you with a technical question. What are fairy wings made of? Butterfly wings, huge petals, or bird feathers? Well, there are all kinds of fairies, you see, said Ma. Just like there are all kinds of people. Do all fairies look like you? I persisted. I don't think so. You smiled. Fairies are very, very beautiful. But Ma, I protested, you are the most beautiful person in the world. You laughed, much more raucously than Tinkerbell would, as you drew heavy curtains over tall windows. Every little girl believes that about their mother, Tumpush. Well, Ma, I've grown up a bit. My world has grown up a lot. I left home as a child and made beautiful friends who became my family. In my work, I've met many beautiful faces, walked with beautiful figures. I've fallen in love with beautiful minds. You grew up too, more books published, many awards won. A few more clashes with your stubbornly loving daughters. Around your eyes, a few more lines celebrating years of full-throated life. More world tours, many with me when you swept me away with your infectious appetite for discovery, your limitless sense of wonder. Remember that list we made some years ago of unvisited countries we absolutely had to explore together? Wheelchair in tow, we made it to most entries on that list. China, Egypt, South Africa, but not Burma. Each time we traveled, you transformed our adventures into provocative essays and best-selling books. And on every trip, we shared even more pleasures together than our plentiful arguments. Yes, we did have fights. I cried when you didn't understand. I begged you not to nag. I yelled at you when I was upset with someone else. I watched in panic as tears welled up in your ever-adolescent eyes. But I am as sure today as I was that night in London that even if you had not been my mother, even if that most precious accident of birth had by rights been the beginning of someone else's story, even if I'd met you in any of your other roles as a poet, professor, painter, friend, or a stranger on a train, you would still be the most beautiful person I could ever have met. At the end of Not Yet, the daughter asks, Ma, did you turn out the light? And the mother replies, yes, my dear. Now, good night.
This is so beautiful, Nandana, so beautiful. Extremely well written. Kinara, tell us, do we have time? Are there questions?
Yeah,
And
there
then
are questions. We have no time, but we'll take a couple of questions.
That would be nice.
Are you okay
Yes,
to answer the questions, Nandana?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
There's a question from Amita. You're a writer yourself, Nandana. Your style is different. As a translator and a daughter of Nabaneeta, how do you keep your styles from not merging?
My style as a writer, not about my style as a translator, not merging with the style of my mother's writing.
Yes.
Well, I did want that to merge, though. I did try very hard to bring the voice that she has in Bengali, and also that's one of the reasons, Amita, that I kept the rhyming structures and the rhythms as exactly sort of faithful to the originals as I could, using words that were as close equivalents to the choices that she made. So when I wrote it, when I did the translation, I wanted my voice as a translator to merge hers as a poet as closely as it could. But you're right, that voice of mine is very, very different from the voice with which I write my children's books. That is entirely different. It's kind of like the fact that the voice with which my mother wrote her poetry was so different from the voice with which she wrote her prose. So I think I learned, I must have absorbed something from that. My mother had.
Okay. Rajeshwari Kalyanam asks, you mentioned that your mother translated from poetry. Did you take a name? Is there a name for the Telugu poet?
I'm sure I can find that very easily, because she translated. So this was like a huge passion for her. So she translated, she's translated practically from every language in India. She translated women poets from all languages. That was one of her passions in life. And then she also actually translated from Hebrew. She went to Israel and learned Hebrew to translate from Hebrew. She translated haiku poetry from Japan and all of that. So it is such a large body of translation that she has, that unfortunately I don't remember all the names of the poets that she translated, but I can easily find that.
Rajeshwari also says that she loved the poem about the ailing mother, and she would have loved it if you had rendered it in Bengali too, because I think it would have I think that emotion comes out better, she said. Then there is another question. Where can I read Bhalo Bhase Paro? I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it properly.
Bhalobashar?
Bhalobhashe paro. I don't know.
ভালোবাসতে পারো?
I mean, she has a very famous series called Bhalobashar Baranda. Maybe it's that.
Okay.
Oh, Bhalobasha Baro. I understand. I get it. Bhalobasha Baro is the Bengali poem that the English translation of which is Out of Reach. So is the question is, who is the question by? Is she Bengali, he or she?
She's, one second, I just scrolled down. Akanksha Mishra.
So Bhalobasha Baro, if you speak Bengali, you can find it in this book, Nabaneeta Debsener Shreshto Kobita. It appears
bring it into the frame.
It appears as Bhalobasha Baro, yeah. But if you're not in Bengali, if you are asking about the translation of it, which is called Out of Reach, you can find that in Acrobat.
You read it today, didn't you?
Yeah, I just read it.
Yes.
And there's an observation by Nabaneeta. She says you come from a lineage of writers. I mean, you did talk about your grandmother very briefly, Radharani Devi, a close associate of Rabindranath Tagore, and a writer who published when women writing publicly was not even thought of. Yeah. And then Naren Dev also, grandfather as well. So she wanted you to develop on it a little bit more.
Sure, I'd love to. That's what a great question. So yeah, my mother often said jokingly that she would have had no escape from poetry because she was born in a house full of poetry.
Yes.
Two poets who were born two poets who are very committed to their identity as poets. And my grandmother actually wrote, you're right, not only did she write at a time when, I mean, you know, my grandmother's story was amazing. She was, can you tell me the name of the one who asked this question?
Nabaneeta Lahiri.
No, Nabaneeta. Wow, how interesting. So Nabaneeta, you know, my grandmother was a child widow. So she was married at 12, widowed at 13, and then remarried scandalously when she was almost 30. That was seen as the most terrifying thing anybody could do. She married a poet, and but before she was married, in that time as a widow, young widow, she already established herself as a best-selling poet. Something that we can't do. We can't really become a bestseller using a book of poetry, but she did, and she was so popular. And she was an early feminist, but she also, we don't have time, so I won't go into the story behind it, which is very interesting. But out of a literary argument that she had with one of the leading male poets of the time, she decided to create a pseudonym and create a different kind of feminism. So she had two feminist poetic personas. One, Radharani Devi, was about women's empowerment, about the light of education and all of that. And then there was Aparajita Devi, and she said that Aparajita Devi was a friend, and she took a promise not to tell anybody that it was her for 13 years, so much so that when she actually broke the silence, nobody believed it. Aparajita Devi was someone who spoke about the everyday that fills a woman's life. So the little bickerings you have with your husband, the extramarital affairs that you have, how close you are to your cook, and how she's your best friend, how you know, about sexual pleasure and orgasm. I mean, things that nobody could imagine in very beautifully couched hidden language, very cleverly. She was also extremely brilliant with form. So she had incredible ways of weaving in complicated ideas and hiding it through beautiful verse and metrical structures. So she did that. And my grandfather was also someone who loved translating. And my mother, I think, inherited her love of translation from my grandfather, who translated Omar Khayyam, and he translated a lot of great international books. So that, and we grew up in this house, old house, which was full of books, full of the legacy that we inherited. And all four of us, it was an, as I said, all-female family, and all four of us, irrespective of age, were writers. We all started writing at 6, 7. My mother's, first poems came out at 7. Mine came out at 6, and my sister similarly has always written. And we had this culture of writing to each other, even though we lived under the same house. We would write letters to each other and poems to each other than do cards or pictures and stuff. So yeah, it was a very literary. So much so that we were not actually self-conscious about it. We assumed that any person would write. We just thought that's something that everybody did. It didn't occur to us that not everybody would grow up to be a writer.
Oh, I think I'll ask a last question. If you could use one word to describe your ma, what would it be?
Loving.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's very hard to use one word though, right? I don't, especially with a person like my mother, who was so, she was very simple in lots of ways, but there were so many rich elements to her personality that I think it's very hard to use one word. She was very caring. She was loving. She had an incredible capacity to love and accept anyone, whether it was her family, her students, her mentees, her fans, her readers, her friends, her peers. She just had this huge gift, really. It was a gift that she had to love, to embrace, to accept, to not judge. And I think that is very rare. It seems like a simple thing, but I think that also made her the great writer and artist that she was.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to end on. There are one or two other small questions, but a lot more of compliments on the group.
Oh, that's
and to you, and saying that it's a lovely session, lovely rendition, and very good poems and all those things, including there's one, Chandana, for the art behind you. Anyway.
Thank you.
I have been admiring that as well. Yes.
Yeah. Now, it has been a wonderful session, very evocative, emotional, and so beautiful, a tribute from a lovely daughter to a lovely mother. Thank you, Nandana, for giving us this opportunity to host you, and Chandana for making it despite your commitments and your other things that we know of, we won't speak about. But thank you so much for making it, and it was a very lovely conversation. Thank you both for making this evening so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Chandana. And a big thank you to Amita and to Siddhika for organizing this.
And
I have my own favorites, of course, because they're so close to me, and it's hard for me to objective, but you just selected, it was just a wonderful curation of poetry. I want to remind readers, I've been asked by my publisher to do this, that this is the book. If you like the poetry, please get it and please share it. If you like it a lot, get one for yourself and get one for someone you know who loves poetry, because poetry needs a lot of support, right? So it needs a bit of hand-holding. You know a poetry lover, give them this book, okay?
Thank you. I'm waiting for mine, which is coming tomorrow, I guess.
Still hasn't come. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 described citizen driven. All of us who have worked to bring this festival out are people from within your all friend circles. We are all citizens and volunteers who have brought this out. This has been an extremely satisfying festival. What the last 2 days have been. Fantastic, a great lineup of speakers, events, talks, discussions, and an amazing audience. It's great to do this HLF. Thank you. HLF rock! Come rain or sunshine, HLF goes on!
పున్నాము వెన్నాల కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు పున్నాము వెన్నాల కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు
నీరు నిమ్మల కింద గన్నెర్ల కింద వంగి పూలే రంగ కొంగందుతూనే